Hello, very good morning. We are ready and raring to go, aren't we? It's October. What is it? It's October the 27th.
Yep, these are the stories that
matter.
to you and to us on the Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and Kirsty Gallagher.
Very good morning
Seamless.
to you. Now, after days of leaks, it really is budget day. We're just hours away from Chancellor Rishi Sunak unveiling his autumn budget, as he promises it begins the work of preparing for a new economy post-COVID. We're asking, what do you want to see in the budget? Do let us know, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
Meanwhile, a new damning report finds the NHS test and trace scheme's been an eye-watering waste of taxpayers' money. We'll explain why, and that's despite the £37 billion in funding, and asking, will anyone be held responsible?
Also, former Met Police officer Wayne Couzens is seeking to appeal against the whole life term he was handed for the murder of Sarah Everard.
And criminal charges have not been ruled out in the fatal accidental shooting by actor Alec Baldwin last week. Why the local district attorney says a criminal prosecution is still on the table.
Plus, the ultimate cop-out. Her Majesty the Queen is forced to pull out of the COP26 summit next week, regrettably, it's said, following medical advice to rest.
How are you? A bit flummoxed today, aren't you?
Ask me in 5 minutes.
OK.
When my head joins in.
Right, let's in the meanwhile start looking at today's front pages. Let's start with the Metro, leading on how Chancellor Rishi Sunak hopes to usher in a new age of optimism as he unveils his post-pandemic budget.
The Daily Telegraph splashes on a report suggesting how the government's test and trace scheme has been an eye-watering waste of taxpayers' money, despite £37 billion in funding.
The Queen has regretfully pulled out of the COP26 summit in Glasgow, and doctors advise that's on the front of the eye today.
The Guardian leads on how the world faces disastrous temperature rises of at least 2.7 degrees Celsius if countries fail to strengthen their climate pledges. That's according to a UN report.
OK, Chancellor Rishi Sunak's expected to spend up to £30 billion from the proceeds of economic growth to invest in public services when he unveils his budget. That's according to The Times today.
The Daily Mail splashes on how the Queen has pulled out of the COP26 summit, with the decision announced after a secret hospital stay, according to the newspaper.
Moving on to the Daily Mirror, reporting how the Queen has been told to rest at home instead of meeting world leaders at the COP26 summit, as we told you at the top of the show there.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak's plan to usher in a new age of optimism when he unveils his budget is the lead story for the Daily Express this morning.
Daily Star reports how actress Joanna Lumley apparently wants to bring back rationing in a bid to rescue the planet.
So, after days of thinking it was budget day, it really is budget day today, and although we've already seen an unprecedented 19 press releases committing over £30 billion of spending across the health service, transport and house building, there is still more to come this afternoon.
Apparently. Chancellor Rishi Sunak's proclaimed that the budget will declare a new economy post-COVID and an age of optimism for Britain. Yet with the threat of rising inflation, the biggest tax rise in 25 years, and holes in public finances, are we actually heading into an age of uncertainty? That's the question.
And here to answer it, talking about the budget and some of the other headlines today, is Brendan Chilton, CEO of the Independent Business Network. A very good morning to you, Brendan.
Good morning to you both.
Now, as I was hinting, I sort of feel we've had 3 budget days already, because we've unprecedented amount of information coming, and even the Commons Speaker is not happy about it.
Well, it does rather make the whole exercise today ever so slightly pointless, given that we know what he's going to be announcing already. Unfortunately, though, this has now become the norm amongst Chancellors of the Exchequer. They like to enjoy the headlines. There was a time, of course, in British politics where, if not just Chancellors, but if any minister made a statement to the media before making it to the House of Commons, they would be seriously reprimanded and sometimes would even have to resign. I don't think that's going to happen to the Chancellor today, because he's probably got more bigger issues to deal with. The biggest is the creeping inflation that we are seeing. Rising wages are good, but if you get rising wages without real increases in productivity, you then get inflation, which is not good. It was a British disease for many, many years, and many governments tried to grapple with it in the 60s, 70s, and largely dealt with towards the end of the 80s. But it was a painful process. So I hope today, when the Chancellor gets up in the House, I haven't read in any of the press releases anything on specifically on inflation, but hopefully we'll see some measures today.
Well, hopefully, yeah. You wanted it all to be a secret, didn't you? Right, back to the budget. It literally took.
Well, it used to be.
Well, I know it did. No, I know, and it's not good, is it? It's completely different to normal.
It's like having Christmas Day and shops open.
Oh well,
in
exactly.
Oh, they are, yeah.
Exactly. There is no.
Sorry, Brendan. We're on one of those mornings.
Yeah.
Anyway, you've got a question.
Brendan, are we heading into an age though of optimism, or is it, as we said, an age of uncertainty with these rising costs and the cost of living? I mean, it's pricey now.
It is extremely expensive, and we're going to see businesses passing on those rising costs to consumers. I think we can be cautiously optimistic, though. I know that's sort of riding both horses at once, but we are now a country outside the European Union. The government needs to take the opportunities that provides. We need to see huge deregulatory efforts on the domestic economy. I think the government, when it comes to prioritising trade deals in the futures, needs to stop worrying about all these things like climate change and all the rest of it and focus on economic growth. In the country at large, we do need to see the tax burden lifted, and businesses up and down the country, because of rising costs, are asking for things such as relief on business rates. We actually need a wholesale reform of that system in itself, cuts in VAT, and I also think cuts in corporation tax are needed because the economy is now starting to slow down. We are seeing rising costs, so we need to stimulate economic growth further with those measures that I've just outlined, and I hope today, when the Chancellor gets up, we'll see some measures in that direction, because if not, we do risk a very difficult winter and certainly a very difficult 2022.
Yeah, it's enough to drive you to drink, although it's not, because one pub owner is warning the price of a pint of beer will end up to rise as much as 30p to help to pay for higher wages and energy costs. This is the point of this. It's all very well handing money out, but it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, so we'll have to be sober through this miserable era as well, which is even worse for all of us. But this is well, this is a real issue for all of us, though, because with these rising costs, businesses have got to accommodate them somewhere, and that will inevitably mean higher costs for consumers. We've seen, as you said, the price of beer going up. We will also see it probably in other retail outlets too. Now, while we've got rising wages, it's not in all sectors, but in some, we're not seeing real increases in productivity. And this is where the real issue, I think, is at the moment in the British economy. Rising costs, rising wages, but no real rising output. Now, some of the supply side measures I've argued for in this programme will go some way to increasing output. But I think the government really needs to look at our industrial strategy as a country and say, what are we making? Can we make more of it? What aren't we making, and why not? Why are we importing a load of cheap goods from around the world? Why can't we try and make it more competitive to produce more here so we can sell more and make our own way in the world?
Well said. Right, let's move on to, a concerning story regards the Queen. She's now, we're learning, going to miss the COP26 climate change summit. She missed, her trip to Northern Ireland last week. She spent an evening in hospital, we understand.
We wonder why, but why it is that a 95-year-old lady might want to have a bit of a break.
I agree with you. Why are we all asking why?
Well, I don't know. Ask Brendan.
Much has been made of this situation, but she is an elderly lady.
Well, if I was told I was going to have to sit for 2 days at a conference listening to people talking about rising taxes, I'd pull a sickie as well. I think you're absolutely right. Her Majesty is 95 years old. She's worked relentlessly for the past 60, 70 years as Queen and as princess to the late King George. She's 95. You know, people get tired as they get older, and her diary, as we know, is enough to make anyone look pretty shocked and exhausted just at the prospect of doing it. And she's been doing it. And let's not forget also this year she has lost her husband. She didn't have a long time to mourn. She was literally back at work within days of that funeral. And so I think we just need to cut her a bit of slack and say, yes, you know, there's nothing wrong with working from home, which she's been doing Zoom meetings with ambassadors and high commissioners and virtual sort of ceremonies and services. Fair play to her. Let her have a gin and dubonnet, put her feet up, play with the corgis and watch a bit of telly, and she can go back to work when she's ready to.
I think you have just spoken for the nation. I really do.
Spot on.
Now, a lot of the papers over the last couple of days and on television, we've been showing some horrendous pictures of what's going on in our rivers, in our coastline. These horrific images of raw sewage being pumped out. And suddenly MPs are saying, oh, we better do something about it, having for years not.
Yes, it does strike you as a little bit of come lately to the party. I mean, this has, as you say, been going on for many, many years, and frankly, it's absolutely disgusting. I know the government have said they're going to change the legislation to require firms to have progressive reductions in the amount of sewage that they pump into our rivers. But I personally don't think this is enough. I think the British people are frankly going, now they've really sort of come live to this as it's been in the news more recently. I think people are quite appalled by this. And I think they're going to want to see both businesses and government working together to actually stop this happening altogether. It can't be healthy, not just for rivers, but for us. You know, people go live swimming. They go in this, everything goes in the rivers, ends up in the sea. We all go down to the coast in the summer. People go fishing. People go, you know, swim a river swimming and all this. It really isn't healthy at all. And I can't imagine, I'm no expert on these things, but I can't imagine it's good for the little fish and the frogs and the ducks that swim in the rivers and all the rest of it. So government, sort this one out.
But yeah, but you see, Brendan, I don't know how old you are. I remember when all the water companies were privatised, and one of the reasons we were told this was necessary was huge investment was needed, and there were a lot of people earning a lot of money out of private water companies to stop this happening. And here we are some decades later, and it's happening worse than it was before.
Well, precisely. I live in Kent, and we've had a huge scandal at the moment where our water firm has been dumping it in the sea as well. You know, whether it's public or private, I think most people at the moment don't care. They just want this to stop. The British people love their countryside, they love the natural world, and they don't want to see it being destroyed by, you know, sort of incompetence from government in terms of not legislating, and frankly laziness and doing business on the cheap from these firms. And so hopefully, you know, we may see some measures today in the Chancellor's budget on this, but if not, we do urgently need the government to get a grip on this, call these businesses in and say we're not going to put up with this anymore.
We do. Finally, and just quickly, I wonder whether Boris will be wearing a mask at the budget announcement today, or indeed many MPs. We know Sajid Javid will be, but apparently everyone working or visiting at the Commons has to wear a mask, but the MPs don't need to if they don't want to.
Yes, as I understand it, this is to do with employees versus MPs, because employees of the House of Commons are subject to the House of Commons authorities, but MPs aren't. But for me, if your staff have to do something, you don't ask your staff to do something without doing it yourself. So there is a whole debate around the wearing of masks. I don't propose to go into that first thing this morning, but if I was going to ask my staff to do something, I would do it as well. So MPs today probably will be wearing masks. And if not, you know, there's a whole question around what MPs should do in terms of answering to Commons authorities or not. But you can't have one rule for one and not one rule for the other.
Do as I say, not as I do. Really?
Well, precisely, you know, but this is Britain. You know, this is the norm.
It's also 30 minutes past 6 and we haven't got time. Brendan, thank you very much. It's always really good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Brendan. But let's have a look at what else is going on today. And criminal charges have not been ruled out in a fatal shooting by the actor Alec Baldwin on the set of his new Western film last week. Baldwin shot and killed Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust after being told the gun he was handed was not loaded. In an interview with the New York Times, Santa Fe County District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwy said it was incorrect to refer to the firearm used in the incident as a prop gun, adding it was a legitimate gun and it was an antique-era appropriate gun. Well, the prosecutor also said that an enormous amount of bullets had been found on the set and investigation was needed into the nature of that ammunition.
A damning report by MPs has found that the government's £37 billion NHS test and trace scheme has been an eye-wateringly expensive failure. The Public Accounts Committee says the scheme failed to break chains of COVID transmission, prevent lockdowns or enable people to return to a more normal way of life. Spending on test and trace is equal to nearly a fifth of the 2021 NHS England budget. You may have views on that, gbviews at gbnews.uk, because one thing is absolutely for certain, no one will be held accountable for that.
No, and what a waste of money. Former Met Police officer Wayne Couzens is seeking permission to appeal his whole life sentence for the murder of Sarah Everard. Wayne Couzens used COVID powers to conduct a fake arrest of the 33-year-old marketing executive. She walked home from a friend's house in March. A court official confirmed yesterday that they'd been notified of an appeal by Mr Couzens. If permission's granted, the case will be heard by the Court of Appeal.
More than 80,000 children aged between 12 and 15 have been booked in online to receive their COVID-19 vaccinations. A total of more than 2.5 million letters are landing on doorsteps this week, inviting parents to book a jab for their child this half-term through the National Booking Service. Vaccines have been available to 12 to 15-year-olds in England since September the 20th, but so far the rollout has been delivered mostly within schools.
The US government panel voted overwhelmingly to recommend the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children ages 5 to 11, saying that the benefits of the jab outweigh the risks. The Food and Drug Administration backed the move yesterday, paving the way for emergency authorization within a matter of weeks. The US is already giving the vaccine to those aged 12 and over. The latest decision, though, affects some 28 million children in the United States.
The legendary US comedian and political satirist Mort Sahl has died. A friend of his told AP News that he passed away yesterday in California at the age of 94. Sahl's biting political commentary won him legions of fans starting in the 1950s. He's been credited as the inspiration for modern stand-up comedy.
Quick look at the sport and a quick recap, in fact, of the Women's World Cup qualifying round, starting with England. And Ella Toone scored a hat-trick on what she called a special night as the team hit 10 goals against Latvia to maintain a 100% record in Women's World Cup qualifying. Meanwhile, Wales treated a record crowd of 5,455 people at the Cardiff City Stadium to a dominant display as they thrashed Estonia 4-0. And Northern Ireland suffered late heartache, I'm afraid, as Stephanie Enzinger's stoppage-time equaliser denied them what would have been a very famous win over Austria at Seaview.
But it wasn't.
No.
It would have been, but it wasn't.
Wasn't.
Because they didn't win.
No. Weather?
Yes. Well, funny you should ask, because today, northwestern England, southern Scotland and the far north of Wales will be cloudy and wet. Elsewhere, it's going to be drier, but mostly cloudy, with some sunny spells in Northern Ireland. It will be a mild day.
Now we're just hours away, as we know, from Chancellor Rishi Sunak unveiling his autumn budget.
We should have a countdown, shouldn't we? We should have a countdown at the bottom.
Yes, it probably will do.
4 hours, 53 minutes.
So the government's expected to announce a military veterans health innovation fund. That's going to be worth £5 million. It's intended to develop new treatments both for physical injuries and also mental issues such as post-traumatic stress disorder. Following the recent withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, the government's been facing fierce criticism and the spotlight has been shining on soldiers suffering with PTSD, with some tragically taking their own lives after leaving service.
Well, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley spoke to veterans who've struggled with their mental health to find out if they think the budget funding is enough. Anna joins us now.
Good morning, Simon and Kirsty. Yes, the government has confirmed the Veterans Health Innovation Fund. It's worth over £5 million. It's worth £5 million, but it's over an unspecified time frame. So we don't know the time that money is going to be allocated out. What we do know is that it's going to provide research grants. That's into finding new surgeries for amputees and blast victims, and new mental health treatment. The government have also said as part of this there's going to be a new technology to help injured veterans rebuild their lives and participate in work, education and sport. And this money comes after the Chancellor announced back in March a £10 million fund for veterans to improve their mental health, and we saw back in summer as well £6 million was allocated to veterans charities who had struggled for funding due to the coronavirus pandemic. But will this additional funding today be enough for those armed forces veterans who have served Britain? Now, many soldiers do see horrific things during their time in service, but coming back into civilian life can sometimes for them be even harder to adjust. Many can suffer PTSD and some will even tragically go on to take their own lives. I spoke to a veteran, David Neves. He served for 14 years in the Yorkshire Regiment, and over his time he was involved in operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, Kosovo and Northern Ireland. And after he left the army, he struggled with his mental health. He actually went for private counselling. He wasn't aware of the services that were available from charities or from the government. And this is what he had to say to me about what he thinks of this £5 million budget announcement for veterans.
Feel insignificant. You come out and you just Joe blogs where it's hard to deal with. You've got that massive void of the job and the camaraderie, the people that you work with in the military, that become your family. You live and work with them, you go out drinking with them when you're on leave. You're literally with them 24/7. And then once you've left the army, you don't have any of that and you feel massively on your own. And it's quite a big shock. And then obviously the losses that you incur with close friends. And it's sad to say that I've actually lost more friends now. I think it's more than double through suicide linked to PTSD than has actually had a loss of life while serving on tour, which is shocking. At the minute, there is nothing in place apart from the charities that we all know that we donate to, Help for Heroes, the Combat Stress, PTSD Resolution, which is the one that I raised the money for. So yeah, I do think there needs to be something in place. £5 million is a good start, but I don't think it's nowhere near enough. When we give, countries like India 55.3 million, I think it was last year, even though there was budget cuts for foreign aid, we're giving billions and billions of pounds out to countries that may need the help. I'm not saying that they don't, but I think we need to start at home with the people, the soldiers, the men and women that are still serving this country, that have served the country. They've done they've done the dirty work of the government, but it seems that once the government once they've done the job, we get swept to the side. No longer needed, really. So 5 million, I think, is a little bit of an insult. Like I said, it's a start, but it's nowhere near enough.
David's experiences there of suffering with PTSD and what he thinks to the budget funding. When he left the army, he also launched a petition. He believes that when soldiers are leaving, the government should do psychometric testing with them to evaluate where they are mentally and then signpost them to the services that they may need. He's also gone on to do a lot of fundraising as well for armed forces charities to provide them with that support so other veterans like himself can be helped.
OK, Anna, for now, thank you very much indeed for that.
You're watching The Great British Breakfast. Coming up, we're going to bring you more predictions for the autumn budget today from some of our experts. That's still to come, but first, let's look at a little more detail. Let's have a look at the weather.
Hello, very good morning to you. Well, there's a lot of wet weather to come over the next few days. Through today, we've got some persistent rain across western parts of the UK, and it's windy and mild. And that's all down to this air coming up from the southwest. But we've got this weather front here, and that's becoming pretty persistent through the day today, not moving very quickly, very far. We've got weather warnings in place across northern England through today. But as we go into Thursday, we'll have one in for Wales as well. Let's take a look at where that rain is at the moment then. We've got some pretty heavy rain across southern Scotland and Cumbria. It's just clearing out of Northern Ireland. It's gradually trickling its way slowly southwards. A lot of cloud in the sky elsewhere. A few sunny breaks developing to the east of higher ground through Wednesday afternoon, but with strong winds, it will feel quite gusty around the coastal areas, despite, though, temperatures getting up to 18, that's 64 in Fahrenheit. As we go through Wednesday evening then, we'll continue to see that rain pushing its way slowly southwards, becoming heavier then across northwest Wales and eventually getting into more of Wales as we go into the early hours of Thursday. Again, ahead of it, we'll see a lot of cloud in the sky, another very mild picture over into the early hours of Thursday, but just starting to turn a little bit cooler in the far northwest of Scotland, 9 degrees there in Stornoway, 48 Fahrenheit, compared to 12 degrees there in London. Now, as we go through into Thursday, what have we got on the cards? More in the way of rain across these western areas. It really is going to persist, and I think those totals will start to build up. So expect some surface water flooding on the roads, the risk of some flash flooding as well in places. Do take care if you are planning any journeys. Still dry across southeast England through the day. Some sunshine developing here. A much, much brighter day for Northern Ireland. A few showers coming in across Scotland, and still on the mild side across the board. Now, as we go into the Halloween weekend, it stays fairly unsettled, further strong winds and the risk of some heavy rain at times too. Our temperatures begin to slide away, though, as we go into Sunday. I'll see you very soon. Take care.
It is 27 minutes past 6. It is budget day.
Oh, yes.
We are all waiting.
For all the details.
All details. The Chancellor's full spending and taxing plans for the year ahead. Over £30 billion of funding already been announced. And it's not yet, well, it is budget day. But
yes,
yeah.
We know. An extra £14 billion is to be spent on healthcare. We know that £3 billion have been allocated to skills building workshops. Another £6 billion to schools and international aid. But who gets what's left? Well, the final £36 billion or so for day-to-day spending. Well, that's the big question.
Here's Matt Vickers. Now, he's not getting the extra £36 billion.
He's going to tell us where it's going.
But he's a Tory MP. I mean, first of all, there was a time where budget day was the moment we heard about the budget. We've had 4 days of this.
Well, do you know what? If there wasn't any lines out there, I'm sure you guys would be finding something to say or to consider might happen.
Don't try and bounce this on us.
We've set the direction.
No. You have a Chancellor who loves the publicity. I've never seen such a slick PR operation as the photographs of him in his slip-on shoes.
Sliders.
Picture of him with his sliders.
Slip-on shoes.
Well, they're slip-on shoes to a certain generation. and pictures with him with his dog on his sofa. He's a master at PR, isn't he?
He's a master at lots of things. He's a master at handling our economy, as he's proved during this economic crisis that we've been involved in.
So you think it's all right that we know already?
I think we've got some vision, we've got some direction, we know where we're going. Employers know about that minimum wage change. That's not a bad thing, I don't think.
What do you hope? First of all, are you going to be wearing a mask in today's session?
Inside the chamber. That chamber, you know, is quite big. It's quite well ventilated. It's got very high ceilings. But you know those people who you see in the chamber with or without. When you're sat here, how close are you sat? How close are you sat?
We wear regular testing.
Where's the mask?
We have to.
Anyway,
No, we're tested regularly. Otherwise, we.
So are we.
Be here.
There's testing facilities on.
Well, how come the Tory benches were all not wearing masks the other week and all the Labour MPs were?
You could ask all those Labour MPs why they weren't wearing those masks at their party conference, sat equally close, if not closer. But then wear them when they're on the chamber to make some political point. The reality is that many of the members on our benches, actually, when we go through those lobbies and we're closer together and we're in, do put a mask on. And it's about context. People have to make informed decisions in the context that they're sat there.
OK.
OK.
So far, so good, yeah.
Oh,
he came in for a quiet chat about the budget. We're giving him...
Let's get back to the budget. Let's get back. Rishi Sunak's announced this budget will declare an age of optimism for Britain. Do you agree? And what does that mean?
I think so. I think you know what? Nobody foresaw what we've been through since I became an MP, since he became the Chancellor.
Well, that was 2019. That wasn't that long ago, was it?
Well, exactly. But nobody predicted what was about to happen. We've now got through that. We're facing up to the challenges and what that's left us. And we're about to start building back. We're about to start looking at where the country goes from here.
Well, you're MP for Stockton. Levelling up is clearly at the heart of all. Presumably, your constituents are always talking to you about what are they going to do for us? Well, what's the answer to that?
Well, we've got a lot of answers. This is a big answer. So if you look at my part of the world already, before today and before we find out about what's going on today, actually, local railway station that people have been banging on about for ages, 15 million being spent. It's putting a lift in to make it disabled access friendly. It's putting a new car park. It's putting a new road access. It's joining it up with a local business park. Great stuff. We've had a town deal. We've heard about these town deals. 23.9 million.
Yeah.
The money is going to be spent by local people. The decisions, there's a board put together, local councillors are on there, local business people are on there, the local colleges on there. They're looking at what the priorities are for that area. It's changing the town centre, it's changing infrastructure, it's putting cycle routes in, local priorities. We've already seen huge amounts of money. Our local high streets had a future high streets fund, 16.5 and big sums of money. We've now got to make sure it all gets spent properly. But actually, I can point to millions and millions and millions of pounds of investment that just hasn't been seen in my part of the world for years, decades and decades and decades.
So this is a very exciting time for you.
You recently did a shift in a shop, didn't you? Or were you recently in the high street doing something?
So I have the absolute pleasure of... So I used to work in Woolies.
Yes, you did.
Top-notch pick-a-mix.
Pick-a-mix.
The world's greatest pick-a-mix. But I now have the pleasure, having done lots of
Woolies
other bits...
that were closed down because of the demise of the high street.
Well, that's the big project of today. So I now chair the all-party parliamentary group on retail.
Yeah.
So I spend all of my days talking about high streets, talking about the challenges that face the high streets.
So business rates is what they all talk about.
Yeah.
Are we going to hear anything on that?
Well, I'm hopeful that we're going to hear it. You know what? The government's been undertaking a fundamental review of business rates. The key word is fundamental.
Does that mean delayed?
Well, no, apparently we're going to hear today where business rates are going. The reality is it's a huge... I spend most of my days talking about business rates, talking to
If you go into any shop, it is all they talk about.
Yeah.
It is money that they have to pay before they earn a penny.
Well,
Yeah, it's a huge... But hospitality and retail are disproportionately hit by business rates just because of the nature of the system. They need big spaces. It's unbelievable challenge for retailers. Hopefully today we're going to hear the headline. That's about... I mean, one of the big things is the fact that the valuations on which business rates are paid are so historic, they're so out of line that people are paying more in rates in so many premises than they are in rent.
And of course, the trade-off with this is the fact that the big online retailers are paying very little, if anything. Is anything going to be done about that?
We're about to find out today, hopefully.
We are. Let's talk about the NHS quickly. £6 billion to be allocated to NHS England to deal with a backlog of patients. I mean, we're always talking about this at the moment, this backlog and what needs to be done, and it's going to take years to get anywhere near where we need to be after the pandemic. But will this sort of solve the backlog, Matt?
The thing is, so I did a shift in a hospital recently. We went onto the theatres, and on the morning I sat down with the surgeons, looking at what they were going to do that day, and they were making the decision.
When you said you did a shift at a hospital, you weren't there with a scalpel already, because I tell you what, if I was
I'll tell you
I
what,
saw an MP looking over me, I would
somebody
be
running quicker than...
Somebody consented, and I was allowed to go into the theatre and see someone have the gallstones removed. How fascinating was that?
Oh, there's a surgeon.
Yeah,
That's a proper
have you
surgeon.
ever seen a gallstone? It's very exciting. It was like a hard piece of sweet. It was bizarre. But during that morning, I got them to see them dishing out the jobs. You know, this is the size of the project this morning. How many of them can we get through? Do we make the decision between somebody's granny's new hip or the kid who had an accident with a car at football at the weekend? That's real. We shut down elective surgery during the pandemic. Those waiting lists are huge. That's why we've seen that increase in NICs. That's why we've seen that increase in spending. Even though the NHS is already getting the biggest cash boost in its history, we're going further. We're pumping more money in to get that backlog down.
Now, look, it's great that you're in talking about it. You're a great sport. But there are some stories that really do wind people up. And we're talking about millions, billions of pounds in a way that a few years ago we never did. The money seems to be passing through our fingers like water. And then you've got this new report saying the test and trace costs £37 billion, and a parliamentary committee has discovered that was an eye-watering waste of cash. People get really angry about this, and they get really angry because no one is ever held to account.
There are two parts to this. The first part, I think it's entirely right that there is a committee scrutinising it and holding the government to account, asking these questions and, you know, making the point.
Quite rightly.
But actually, in real terms, we talk about this fantastic vaccination rollout. That was a punt. You know, we invested up front, took the chance on these vaccines because it was the only way to do it, and actually it's paid off. That's why we're ahead of the game. That's why we're up front in the vaccine rollout, because we took the challenges.
Not anymore, but yes.
Well, we got there because we spent that cash. The reason we're rolling out some of our vaccines to the rest of the world is because we did that and because we put ourselves in that position. It could have gone awfully wrong. Should we have held on to the money and not done anything that was a bit, you know, pushy to get hold of those vaccines? Of course we were doing exactly the right thing. It could have been egg on our face, but it wasn't, thankfully, and that's why we're in the position we are today. That's why we're not all wearing masks when we walk down the street. That's why the pub's open, and that's why the economy is getting back on its feet.
Hang on, a lot of people are saying we need to. There is the plan B. What's your view on that? Should we be...
You know what, the data obviously doesn't suggest it at the minute, or the government would be doing it. I think in my part of the world, when I speak to people, they are relieved to be back at work, to be doing what they want to do, to get rid of the damn masks. If it becomes necessary, then that's where we'll end up. But actually, this vaccine rollout is fantastic. We're seeing hospitalisation, you know, it's not happening. It's not happening.
Do you want to be Prime Minister one day?
No, it's a big job. It's a big job.
Why?
Because,
Well, it's
you
a
know
big
what?
job, but why wouldn't you?
This job is pretty big. That job must be unbelievably big. Yeah, we'll leave that to some of
I just want to have this on record so that in 20 years we'll say,
Remind
remember
you of
Scott?
that, Matt.
Well, I won't be around in 20 years, but you will be, I suspect. Matt, it's really good to see you. And
Matt,
thank you very much for
you
saying
are
that.
great. We love having you in. Thank you very much indeed.
We ask people in to talk about one thing and then we bombard them with all the other stuff.
But you're a great
Well
sport.
done you for taking it on.
Yes, exactly. Thanks, Matt. Right, coming up with 100 days until the Winter Olympics, we'll speak to two athletes, Zoe and Izzy Atkin, about their preparations. That's coming up after this. Good morning, welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. Coming up to 20 to 7.
Now, we're just 100 days away from the start of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. Team GB will be hoping to improve on their medal count from 2018 when they finished in 19th place with 5 medals. Hopefully, the debut events of air freestyle, women's monobob,
That could have come out in a very different way.
and new mixed events will provide more opportunities for success.
To give us their predictions, also insight into the next 100 days, the sisters Izzy Atkin, freestyle Team GB skier and Olympic bronze medalist, and her sister Zoe as well, GB Snow Sport World Cup squad skier and Team GB hopeful. Good morning to you both. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with you, Izzy. I mean, how did it feel to win Britain's first skiing medal at the last Winter Olympics? And I guess you're very much looking to replicate that feeling in February.
Yeah, it was honestly a very surreal but incredible experience. I didn't think it actually fully settled in until after the medal ceremony and when I had finally gotten a chance to go through all my congratulatory texts. But I was just really proud, and it was an unexpected achievement. I was just so grateful to be at the Olympics and having that experience, and the medal was just another, I guess, source of pride.
Yeah.
Source of pride, a source of inspiration for you, Zoe, more than anybody, I suspect.
Yeah, it was very inspiring to watch Izzy win an Olympic medal, but it's always been a dream for me just to go to the Olympics. So I'm really looking forward to enjoying the experience and enjoying the winter leading up to it as well.
Of course, the training is, pretty hardcore, I think is the word, isn't it? You're both in different places. You're in Austria, Zoe. Izzy, you're in Switzerland, right? At the moment. Tell us about, your training and what this next 100 days looks like for you. Let's start with you, Zoe. Zoe, can you hear me? I think we might have lost sound. Izzy, I think...
Sorry, I just broke up.
Oh, no, that's fine. Zoe, I hope you can hear me. I was just asking about your training and what that next, 100 days leading up to the Beijing Winter Olympics looks like for you.
Yeah, training's going really well. Over the summer, I was working at the Utah Olympic Park and learning some new tricks into pools of water. So that helps with learning new tricks without having to try them straight on snow. And yeah, so this winter I'll be at home training in Utah with the amazing facilities over there. And yeah, hopefully taking these new tricks to snow and getting a new run for the Olympics that you guys will see. I'm really excited about it.
You two sisters, which is lovely, but in some cases that can add to the competitive spirit. Are you both very competitive with one another?
I'd say we're pretty competitive.
Well, you really are, because you leapt in and answered your sister's question. And you were a bit quicker, has to be said. So, Izzy, what about this sister thing? I mean, are you very supportive of each other right up until the day? Is there a moment where you go into competitive mode?
No, I think we're very supportive of each other. Luckily, we compete in different events, so it's not like we're pitted against each other in any sort of way. I support Zoe in her half pipe, and I hope that she gets the best result and skis the best that she can. And she does the same for me in slopestyle and half pipe. So it would probably look a bit differently if we were competing in the same event against each other, but luckily we don't have to deal with that.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, isn't it, that you're both involved in, the same sport, although different disciplines, of course. How did you actually, just quickly, I mean, I'm so interested, how did you actually get into winter sports, into skiing and snowboarding, etc.?
Well, our parents had us start skiing at such a young age, and then I kind of just fell into slopestyle and freestyle skiing. It was kind of just a lucky road for me. Being in Utah, obviously the facilities for specifically freestyle skiing are so great and amazing that it's just helped push me along in that direction and get me really prepared for those kinds of competitions and events.
Well, it's great to see you both. You're in different countries. I don't know how often you talk to each other. Is there anything you want to say to each other right now?
I miss you.
Oh, it's lovely.
Ah,
Oh, fabulous.
we've
Listen,
provided a service to you both this morning. It's
Yes.
really good to see you. We wish you
Thank
both the best of luck. We'll be talking to you, I'm sure, before Beijing, but
We will.
in the meantime, I hope the training goes well.
thanks, Izzy and Zoe. Brilliant. Right, one of the great talking points from the budget, let's get back to that. 19 press releases is the rising of the national minimum wage. That's from £8.91 an hour to £9.50 an hour. Well, the Chancellor said this increase would give full-time minimum wage earners an extra £1,000 or so in their pocket by the end of the year. However, Labour have said that with high inflation, rising gas prices and tax increases, the increase would not really make any difference to the millions currently struggling on the current wage.
Well, let's talk more about this. Here to give his thoughts on that national minimum wage is Andrew Sachs, Head of Media and Analysis at ETX Capital in London. Andrew, good morning to you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
We all talk about the national living wage going up, but there's a price to be paid, and the price is heavy.
It certainly is. And actually, there's a very good point that you just made, that it might appear to be £1 extra per hour, which seems like a lot. However, there has been a cost of living crisis over the last few months, and I think what will happen is it will cause this should be perhaps a bit of more of a talking point among economists and among businesses and perhaps the wider public, in that the increase in trying to increase the minimum wage, living wage, is potentially could cause those people who would perhaps benefit from it to maybe even lose their jobs, because employers have to find that money from somewhere. And it's very difficult at the moment when there's been supply chain issues, logistical problems. There's been a year's worth of lockdowns before, which has impacted small to medium-sized businesses. And it will be those small to medium-sized businesses which will perhaps feel the pinch, mainly because of the rising cost of operating their businesses, but also the increased taxes they may have to pay also, bearing in mind Rishi Sunak's planned huge spend on the public sector.
Well, even the simple thing of a pint of beer is going to go up. I mean, it's frightening, really, isn't it?
I think so. I think this is the elephant in the room, really. And it's the elephant in the room where the markets are concerned as well.
Inflation.
Yes, inflation, and of course where this money is going to come from. It's being very cleverly packaged. It's being, oh look, the economy has risen, which it has, in certain sectors only though, and the economy's gone up. However, we've now got all these extra tens of billions to spend, but that's not how it works. That has to come from somewhere. The revenue generation in this country nowadays is quite different to how it was 2 years ago, when there was quite a strong entrepreneurial small business sector. Now it's large government and large blue chip corporations.
I mean, it's complicated. There's an understatement of the day. But when the Chancellor gets up today, people are going to see what his prediction for growth is. Now, if he says it's something like 7%, he's going to create the optimism that he wants to generate. At some point, he's going to be found to be right or wrong. But today, he can do that. And it's not like we, as a country, have a credit card to pay off. We go to the Bank of England if we want money, but we don't think of how we pay for these things in the way perhaps we should.
That's absolutely right. And actually, it was quite recently a pretty well-known government official once said, oh, when governments borrow money, they never pay them back. So that's actually quite true. There is an element of truth in that. But of course, this is a situation which is a public spending issue. And it's going to be... What's been completely written off is the £37 billion that was spent on the test and trace. No one's talking about that.
Well, they are. It's the front page of the Telegraph.
It's on the... Yes, the news is talking about it, but the government and the officials, there's no real... It seemed to go by. But now we have tens of billions being spent on public transport initiatives, on the NHS, which is interesting because it's got to be paid for by somebody. And then you have the workers' unions explaining to the GPs that they don't want them to go back to work. So it might possibly be more money down a big black hole.
And you know, It's naive, we touched upon this, for us to assume the economy is growing, to plan as if everything is back to normal, because actually, I mean, how detrimental would it be, how disastrous would it be if these restrictions came back in for our economy, or indeed another lockdown, which we're told won't happen, but you never know.
You never know, that's absolutely right. And we are told it won't happen, but there is a lingering thought.
Well, we've learnt that, haven't we?
We have learnt that, and the wider public are wise to it now. So people are being very conservative. When you look at the spending habits of the public, they are conservative. People are concerned about the cost, these cost rises that have been. I've seen cases where people's electricity bill has gone up from £50 a month to £150 a month. And therefore, with that, plus the potential of another lockdown and more restrictions, you know, yesterday the Coronavirus Act was extended for another 6 months, giving powers to do so. If that happens, it would be debilitating for even the large companies that have so far sustained themselves quite well on the London Stock Exchange, or if you look at the blue chip companies have sustained themselves. How much more of that really they can stand when the small business sector has been decimated by it?
Do you think the government, do you think the Chancellor get it, understand the mood of the country, which at the moment, you're suggesting another lockdown, people perhaps just won't wear it?
They won't wear it, you're absolutely right. And I think that's a very interesting question, really, because what we have here is a very different type of government and different political landscape to how it was in the late 1970s, early 1980s, when there was a worldwide recession and there was genuinely no money in the coffers, and conservative policy had to be enacted to get people working and encourage small business. It was a very business-friendly environment back then, against all odds. Now it's quite different. What you have is small businessmen. There were 5 million small limited companies in the UK who have all suffered very badly from the lockdowns and over the last year. They're not the ones prospering. The prosperous area is the big blue chip companies and the public sector. And the public sector is being funded by the public. So therefore, it relies on them having a good stream of income and a good disposable, taxable income to be able to move that forward. So I think, unfortunately, there is a case of an out-of-touch sentiment within those making the policies compared to even the business sector, let alone the actual general public.
A very quick word about the PR machine behind Rishi Sunak. We've seen loads of pictures of him with his dog, with his, not his slip-ons, what are they called?
Sliders.
Sliders, there we are. He's got a very well-oiled PR machine behind him, and there's naked politics going on here in terms of who should be our next Prime Minister, isn't there? There
is indeed, and I think he hasn't publicly said so, and it would be really wrong for me to assume so, but it appears that he has aspirations of going in that direction. And what we then have is a very different character to the current Prime Minister, who is borderline socialist and who has this particular Rishi Sunak is not. He is a commercial capitalist, but for his own large empire. I think the small businesses and the smaller sized businesses in the regional areas would be perhaps not taken into consideration. And what we would see is all the analysts and all the stock market enthusiasts looking at the top blue chip FTSE 100 companies and focusing on the performance of those.
So we're only a few hours away.
That's right.
We are.
Thank you, Andrew Sachs. Thank you very much indeed. Great to have you.
Very nice to see you. Thank you.
Now, coming up, the Queen is set to miss the COP26 climate conference. We'll take a look at what this may mean for her health. Welcome back. It is 5 minutes to 7. Now, a rail strike planned to cause disruption during the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow is unlikely to be avoided, says Scotland's Transport Minister. ScotRail staff are using industrial action to demand better pay and working conditions. 30,000 people are expected to descend on Scotland's largest city during the summit, which lasts for a fortnight from this Sunday. The strike is planned for the duration of the conference.
Well, one COP26 delegate who will have to miss the conference is the Queen after receiving medical advice to rest. The 95-year-old monarch underwent preliminary medical checks in hospital last Wednesday after also cancelling a visit to Northern Ireland. She's only conducted one day of remote engagements in the week since. The Queen apparently wants COP26 to result in meaningful action, though, after being overheard at Welsh Parliament earlier this month saying it was really irritating when climate issues go unanswered. Yeah,
well,
it's a real shame, but it's sensible, isn't it? I mean, as we were saying earlier,
you can't do years old. We forget,
everything.
and she's lost her husband this year.
Yeah.
And as long as we're told, I think that there was frustration last week that we found out that she'd been in hospital.
That's right.
Nobody would criticise them for saying she's been in hospital.
Just needed
tonight.
a few medical, a few checks. I mean, that's absolutely
people wish her nothing
right
but
thing.
well. So yes, as do we.
Yeah, we do. But she won't be at COP26, which of course will be.
I'm sure she'll be very upset about it.
We'll be talking about that a lot over the next 2 weeks. This is a good story. Hollywood star and Wrexham, if you didn't know this, co-owner Ryan Reynolds, took fans by surprise last night. He watched his team in action for the first time. The Deadpool actor took 100% control of the Welsh club from the Wrexham Supporters Trust in February. That after his bid was approved by fans, but he may have wished to stay at home. Wrexham were defeated only just 3-2 by Maidenhead United. I mean, that is a great story, isn't it? Did you know that?
What?
Did you know that he was the...
Yeah, no, I remember we did it at the time when he took it off.
Yes.
But he's actually gone to see a game.
It was brilliant. The pictures are great. I love that. It's really, really good for the club and for football.
I mean, he's not the first high-profile celebrity to do it.
No. Well,
but
Elton John.
Elton John.
Of course, and many others, of course. But he's a
Eric
Hollywood star.
No, do you remember Eric Morecambe?
Well, of course I do.
Watford? It was brilliant.
Yeah, I do.
Anyway.
I do. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But no, I do love that story. Also, anything you want to talk about, get your views in at GBNews or GBviews at
GBnews.uk.
UK, because what were you going to...
No, some of you are talking about what you'd like to see from the budget. And we'd like to hear more of these because we'll read these throughout the morning up until Rishi Sunak gets on his feet. Interesting to hear the view from Andrew Sachs there about Rishi Sunak and his relationship with the Prime Minister. A lot of suggestions that the two of them are vying for control. One holds the purse strings, which might be a good argument means he's already in control. But this PR battle, which, I think that's what's going on. These wonderful pictures of Rishi Sunak being posing on a sofa with his dog.
With his dog, and then wearing, I think the mirror. It was the mirror that picked up.
For capturing the moment he's rehearsing his budget speech. It's a very smooth operation.
In a slider. Not a slip-on, a slider. Shall we have a quick... let's have a quick glance over some of the front pages before we leave you for now. Let's look at the Metro, which does lead on how Chancellor Rishi Sunak hopes to usher in a new age of optimism as he unveils his post-pandemic budget.
Telegraph splashes on a report suggesting how the government's test and trace scheme has been an eye-watering waste of taxpayers' money, and that's despite £37 billion of funding.
As we mentioned just now, the Queen has regretfully pulled out of the COP26 summit in Glasgow on doctors' advice. That's the Eye reporting that.
The Guardian leads on how the world faces disastrous temperature rises of at least 2.7 degrees Celsius if countries fail to strengthen their climate pledges. Now, that's according to a UN report.
Again, Chancellor Sunak expected to spend up to £30 billion from the proceeds of economic growth to invest in public services when he unveils that budget today, according to The Times.
Now, the Daily Mail splashes on how the Queen has pulled out of the COP26 summit with the decision announced after a secret hospital stay, says the paper.
Daily Mirror reporting again how the Queen has been told to rest at home instead of meeting world leaders at the COP26 summit.
And the Chancellor's plan to usher in a new age of optimism when he unveils his budget is the lead story for the Daily Express today.
And very quickly, finally, the Daily Star, a very different story, reporting how actress Joanna Lumley apparently wants to bring back rationing in a bid to rescue the planet. I wonder what you think about that. Let us know.
We'll be back in just a moment. 7 o'clock. Very good morning. It's Wednesday, the 27th of October. These are the stories that matter to you and to us on the Great British Breakfast with Simon McCoy and Kirsty Gallagher.
Good morning. Yes, after days of leaks, it really is budget day. We're just hours away, in fact, from Chancellor Rishi Sunak unveiling his autumn budget as he promises it begins the work of preparing for a new economy post-COVID. And we're asking, what do you want to see in the budget? Do let us know. We'll read them out. Let us know at GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
Meanwhile, a damning new report finds the NHS test and trace scheme has been an eye-watering waste of taxpayers' money. We'll explain why, despite the £37 billion in funding, and asking, will anyone be held responsible?
Also, former Met Police officer Wayne Couzens is seeking to appeal against the whole life term he was handed for the murder of Sarah Everard.
And criminal charges haven't been ruled out in the fatal accidental shooting by actor Alec Baldwin, while the local district attorney says a criminal prosecution is still on the table.
Plus, the ultimate cop-out. Her Majesty the Queen is forced to pull out of the COP26 summit next week. Regrettably, it's said, following medical advice to rest.
It's budget day today. The Chancellor Rishi Sunak will announce the government's spending plans for the next few years. But this autumn budget is unusual, as after a deluge of pre-budget funding announcements, we already know some of its contents. This includes nearly £7 billion for transport in England's cities, a rise in the national minimum wage, and a pledge to build around 160,000 new green homes on brownfield sites across England.
Well, joining us to discuss her thoughts on the budget is Dr. Lydia Prieg, Head of Economics at the New Economics Foundation. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Our Chancellor said that this budget will create an age of optimism for Britons and their economy. Do you think you see anything to be optimistic about right now?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. So, we know Sunak is going to try to strike a very optimistic tone. And as you say, we've had an unprecedented amount of press releases in recent days discussing spending pledges. However, I would emphasise that despite that, we are going to be looking at an austerity budget. So first of all, the spending pledges that have been announced, they're not actually that big. So far, they total around 30 billion, which as far as government spending pledges go in budgets is really not an enormous amount. And secondly, in all those other areas that haven't been signalled out as key areas, those government departments are going to have to try to find savings and make difficult choices because we know the Chancellor is going to make a pledge to, for fiscal responsibility and to balance the books on day-to-day spending within a few years. So, for example, people are talking about how education, for example, could be a loser overall in this budget. Despite the optimistic tone, it will be an austerity budget, unfortunately.
Well, it has to be, doesn't it? We've just been through 2 years of hell.
Well, first of all, I would say we're not actually through the COVID crisis completely yet. And we're still at a stage where the recovery is precarious and where we're still looking to do things like minimise long-term economic scarring, so long-term damage from the crisis. So I think the Chancellor needs to be mindful of that. He also needs to be mindful of the cost of living crisis that a lot of people are facing at the moment. For example, if you take his pledge to increase the living wage, whilst it's being put up by over 6%, which on paper sounds fabulous. The £9.50 that it's being put up to, that level is what living wage campaigners were calling for actually a year ago, before the recent cost of living increases have happened. And given that annual inflation is probably going to be around 4%, maybe higher in 2022, people in those positions still won't be able necessarily to afford the day-to-day necessities without a lot of stress or having to make extremely difficult choices. I would also add that while there's a lot of headlines about the quantity of debt that the government has obviously issued during the COVID crisis to pay for the crisis, it has been done at record low interest rates, and interest rate payments, which is what we should be really watching. It's much more important and indicator than the overall level of debt, are at very low levels historically, and even with the inflation that's anticipated, are still going to to be in real terms and as a percentage of tax revenues and GDP at relatively low levels. So yes, debt is a risk that should be monitored and taken seriously. But when you look at the other risks that the economy faces and taking the balance of risks, an austerity budget at this time certainly, I would say, is ill-advised.
I mean, some economists have said that Rishi Sunak focuses on keeping a lid on government spending and it is a risk for the economy, which after a rapid recovery in the first half of the year is slowing, of course, markedly. What would you say to that? And do you consider yourself one of these economists?
Yes, absolutely. It's very important. Like if you take the cost of living crisis, households going out and spending money on goods and services drives demand, which is the driver of the economy. And if you've got households that don't have enough money to go out and afford the basics, that's a problem for everyone because it's a problem for aggregate demand. Similarly, if you've got low confidence levels, confidence is very, very important in economic terms. If you've got households that are afraid to spend because they're nervous, or businesses that are afraid to invest because they're nervous, that can lag on growth. So I would absolutely put myself in that category of economists. And we've actually seen, historic.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
We've actually seen historically.
Sorry, we're having one of those nightmares of a slight time delay, so forgive me. But I'm just wondering, when we talk about money owed, the money eventually has to come from us as taxpayers. Where do you think the government sees an area where, well, they're going to have to pay? Is it going to be the traditionals? We're going to see tobacco, we're going to see alcohol, are we going to really see petrol go up even more, given that it's at its highest level ever? Where will the money come from?
Well, in this budget, I mean, we've already seen, obviously, the government, announce some big tax rises previously. So, for example, we know they're going to put up corporation tax. We know they're going to put up, we've got the national insurance rise and the rise on the dividends tax. So they've already announced some tax rises. So I think the emphasis in this budget isn't going to be on further tax rises. It's going to be on reductions in spending overall, even though it won't be presented in those terms. However, I would say we do know that it seems like the government isn't going to back down and do some tax cuts, for example, green tax cuts at this point of time. On the tax cut side of things, it seems like the government wants to wait a few years, and before the election, I think they're hoping to be able to do some tax cuts. But I think this budget is going to be focused on reduced spending rather than tax rises at this point, given the tax rises we've already had announced.
I'll ask you a really silly question. I'm just wondering, when we talk about debt, this country's huge debt running at a huge percentage of GDP, who is it who's sitting in an office somewhere is one day going to say, I want my money back? Aren't we just borrowing from ourselves and we can do this in perpetuity because there's no one who is going to say, right, I'm calling the debt now?
Well, what's actually very interesting, specifically about the COVID debt, the debt we borrowed during the crisis, is because of long-standing macroeconomic conditions and low inflationary, environment, the Bank of England has actually bought up nearly all of the debt that the government has issued during the crisis. So the Bank of England currently owns nearly all of the COVID debt. And obviously, it'll be very interesting to see how the Bank of England, chooses to manage that situation. I mean, as I've said before, yes, the level of debt is high, but the interest rate payments, which is what really counts, like the cost of servicing that debt, is very low. So at the moment, I really don't think we've got a big debt crisis on our hands, and the financial markets don't seem to think that either. However, if a situation emerged in the future where we did, the Bank of England would then be in an interesting position where it could decide, does it want to renegotiate some of the terms of that debt to make it easier, for example, for the government to repay? I mean, there would be various options, but the Bank of England currently owns nearly all the debt that was issued during the COVID crisis.
OK, very, very interesting indeed. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Lydia Prigg, Head of Economics at the New Economics Foundation.
Nice to see you. Thank you. Now, let's have a look at what else is going on today. And criminal charges have not been ruled out in that fatal shooting by actor Alec Baldwin on the set of his new Western film. Baldwin shot and killed Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust last week, after being told that the gun he was handed was not loaded. In an interview with the New York Times, Santa Fe County District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwies said it was incorrect to refer to the firearm used in the incident as a prop gun, adding it was a legit gun and it was an antique-era appropriate gun. The prosecutor also said that an enormous amount of bullets had been found on the set and an investigation was needed into the nature of that ammunition.
A damning report by MPs has found that the government's £37 billion NHS test and trace scheme has been an eye-wateringly expensive failure. The Public Accounts Committee says the scheme failed to break chains of COVID transmission, prevent lockdowns, or in fact enable people to return to a more normal way of life. Spending on test and trace is equal to nearly a fifth of the 2020-2021 NHS England budget.
The former Met police officer Wayne Couzens is seeking permission to appeal his whole life sentence for the murder of Sarah Everard. Couzens used COVID powers to conduct a fake arrest of the 33-year-old marketing executive as she walked home from a friend's house in March. A court official confirmed yesterday that they had been notified of an appeal by Mr. Couzens. If permission is granted, the case will be heard by the Court of Appeal.
More than 80,000 children aged between 12 and 15 have been booked in online to receive their COVID-19 vaccinations. A total of more than 2.5 million letters are landing on doorsteps this week, inviting parents to book a jab for their child this half-term through the National Booking Service. Vaccines have been available to 12 to 15-year-olds in England since September the 20th, but so far the rollout has been delivered mostly in schools.
A US government panel voted overwhelmingly to recommend the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children ages 5 to 11, saying the benefits of the jab outweigh the risks. The Food and Drug Administration backed the move yesterday, paving the way for emergency authorization within a matter of weeks. The US is already giving the vaccine to those aged 12 and over. This latest decision affects some 28 million children in the United States.
Legendary US comedian and political satirist Mort Sahl has died. A friend of Mr. Sahl told AP News that he passed away yesterday in California at the age of 94. Sahl's biting political commentary won him legions of fans starting in the 1950s. He's also been credited as the inspiration for modern stand-up comedy.
Sport, a quick recap of the Women's World Cup qualifying round, starting with England. Ella Toone scored a hat-trick on what she called a special night as the team hit 10 goals against Latvia. 10 goals to maintain their 100% record in the Women's World Cup qualifying. Meanwhile, Wales treated a record crowd of 5,455 at the Cardiff City Stadium to a dominant display as they thrashed Estonia 4-0. Northern Ireland, though, suffered late heartache as Stephanie Enziger's stoppage-time equaliser denied them what would have been a famous win over Austria at Seaview.
Quick look at the weather today. North-western England, southern Scotland and far north of Wales will be cloudy and wet. Elsewhere, drier but mostly cloudy with some sunny spells in Northern Ireland. A mild day.
It's come out to 7:15 and we're just hours away from the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, unveiling his autumn budget, officially at least. The government is expected to announce a military veterans health innovation fund worth £5 million. Now that's intended to develop new treatments both for physical injuries and mental issues such as post-traumatic stress disorder. Following the recent withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, the government has been facing fierce criticism and the spotlight has been shone on soldiers suffering with PTSD, with some tragically taking their own lives after leaving service.
Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley spoke to veterans who've struggled with their mental health to find out if they think that the budget funding is enough. Good morning to you, Anna.
Good morning, Kirsty and Simon. Yes, this £5 million funding set to be announced this afternoon for veterans. It's going to be given over an unspecified time, but the allocation is said to be for research grants into finding new surgeries for amputees and blast victims, as well as new mental health treatments. There's said to also be a new technology to help injured veterans rebuild their lives and participate in work, education and sport. This £5 million comes after the Chancellor announced back in March £10 million of funding for the mental health of veterans and supporting them in that way, and back in summer as well £6 million was also given to armed forces charities to prop them up as a result of the lack of funding they had due to the coronavirus pandemic. And we know that soldiers see so many difficult, heartbreaking things during their time in service, but they can also find it really hard to adjust when coming back to civilian life and leaving the forces. Some do develop PTSD from what they've seen, and tragically, some do even go on to take their own lives. There's multiple charities out there that are supporting the armed forces. One is called PTSD Resolution, and that works to link up veterans with therapists so they can talk through the trauma and the issues and the PTSD that they experience to try and help them. I spoke to Patrick Rea, who works at the charity. He explained what they do and what he thinks to this funding of £5 million in the budget.
It's fundamentally, clearly a humanitarian issue. These people are suffering, they've served their country, and we as a community have an obligation to support them. And frankly, it is not very good, the support that's otherwise available to them. The NHS is kind of overwhelmed. There are long waiting lists, and one really needs to understand the sorts of specific problem that veterans have in relation to trauma, which is not like the run-of-the-mill, dare I say, or other sorts of trauma which might result from car accidents or other sorts of incidents too. This is a usually a very complex case involving maybe several incidents, things that forces veterans saw that they're trying to come to terms with, and all the sort of problems concomitant with that too. In terms of funding, well, clearly the new government funding is extremely welcome. I mean, there never really is enough funding, and I'm sure you'll hear other charities say that too in relation to other things that are happening. But it is extremely welcome. It's good news. For people like us, we don't know whether or not we will be eligible for this additional funding, but we have had some great support from a number of organizations such as the Armed Forces Trust, Covenant Trust, who will be very generous with us, and we're grateful for that. So yes, the additional funding is very welcome. And I think what's important too is organizations like us being able to demonstrate that those funds are being used for the intention that they were intended, as it were, so that they're used very carefully, that the money is going to precisely the intended people, which is the veterans community and their family members too.
Patrick there saying that the charity welcomes the funding. We don't exactly know how it's going to be split and allocated, but it's clear that charities like PTSD Resolution and all the other armed force charities out there are doing so much good to help those veterans who have helped fight for Britain.
Anna, thank you very much. That's Anna Riley there.
Now, coming up, the Queen's set to miss the COP26 climate conference, which starts next week. We'll take a look at what this may mean for her health. That's after a more detailed look at the weather.
Hello, very good morning to you. Well, there's a lot of wet weather to come over the next few days. Through today, we've got some persistent rain across western parts of the UK, and it's windy and mild. And that's all down to this air coming up from the southwest. But we've got this weather front here, and that's becoming pretty persistent through the day today, not moving very quickly, very far. We've got weather warnings in place across northern England through today, but as we go into Thursday, we'll have one in for Wales as well. Let's take a look at where that rain is at the moment then. We've got some pretty heavy rain across southern Scotland and Cumbria. It's just clearing out of Northern Ireland. It's gradually trickling its way slowly southwards. A lot of cloud in the sky elsewhere. A few sunny breaks developing to the east of higher ground through Wednesday afternoon, but with strong winds, it will feel quite gusty around the coastal areas, despite, though, temperatures getting up to 18, that's 64 in Fahrenheit. As we go through Wednesday evening then, we'll continue to see that rain pushing its way slowly southwards, becoming heavier then across northwest Wales and eventually getting into more of Wales as we go into the early hours of Thursday. Again, ahead of it, we'll see a lot of cloud in the sky, another very mild picture over into the early hours of Thursday, but just starting to turn a little bit cooler in the far northwest of Scotland, 9 degrees there in Stornoway, 48 Fahrenheit, compared to 12 degrees there in London. Now, as we go through into Thursday, what have we got on the cards? More in the way of rain across these western areas. It really is going to persist, and I think those totals will start to build up. So expect some surface water flooding on the roads, the risk of some flash flooding as well in places. Do take care if you are planning any journeys. Still dry across southeast England through the day. Some sunshine developing here. A much, much brighter day for Northern Ireland. A few showers coming in across Scotland, and still on the mild side across the board. Now, as we go into the Halloween weekend, it stays fairly unsettled, further strong winds and the risk of some heavy rain at times too. Our temperatures begin to slide away though as we go into Sunday. I'll see you very soon. Take care. Good morning. Welcome
If
back.
it's good enough for the weather presenter,
Just
it
honestly,
is good. If that's what it takes to be fashionable, I mean, there's not much to it, but I think it works.
so wrong. Can I just say that he's come in last minute and I hadn't seen this because he's just turned around. Because that's the way it is working with Simon McCoy.
Everybody says you're a grumpy I wear old-fashioned stuff, and I just thought, this is the moment I'm going to grab fashion by the collar.
The collar, by the lapel.
Hasn't really worked.
Right, do you want to leave it there or are you going to take it off?
Suited the weather presenter better than it suited me. There we go.
Let's just say yes, it did. Anyway, right, that's what it's like working with him.
This is trend-setting.
Trend-setting. You are
just not here. Right.
Cheer anyone up, wouldn't you? You do cheer anyone up. Right.
It was a good outfit, though. Got to hand it to him. Now, you're watching The Great British Breakfast. It is 23 minutes past 7. You're with Kirsty and with Simon. A very good morning.
Now, the Queen is set to miss yet another public engagement, the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow, after being advised to rest by palace doctors. After cancelling her trip to Northern Ireland last week, the 95-year-old monarch underwent preliminary medical checks in hospital on Wednesday. She's only conducted one day of remote engagements in the week since. This bout of ill health comes after she was pictured using a walking stick at a public event, such as the opening of the Welsh Parliament earlier this month.
Well, joining us now to talk more about this, royal expert Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, how good to see you. Thank you very much for your time this morning. It's easy to forget we're talking about someone who's 95 years old.
You're absolutely right. And whereas, of course, this is unfortunate when the Queen attends any event, and this is a particularly significant event, of course, it adds a very, very special cachet to it. And someone above politics, as she is, can also be wonderfully persuasive, as we know. But yes, you're absolutely right. She's 95 and she's been advised to rest, and that is what she's doing. And the good news, I think, and this is the thing to emphasize, because it would have been quite a lengthy round trip to have gone to Glasgow as intended and then returned. The good news is that she is performing light duties. The ambassadors of Korea and Switzerland presented their credentials virtually yesterday. She spoke with the chancellor, as is traditional, the night before the budget. So she's performing light duties, and I think the emphasis is, although we don't know the problem that she's recently suffered from, the good news appears to be positive and a slow return to something approaching normality. At least we hope so.
Morning, Richard. Yeah, of course. And we've got to absolutely remember that she is an elderly lady. She's been through so much as well. I mean, it would be a very long 2 weeks. I mean, there are many that probably wouldn't want to be up there at the COP26, conference anyway. But she was overheard, to be fair to her, saying it was really irritating. She wasn't going to be able to be there and when climate issues have gone unaddressed. So are you taking from that, it is very important to her?
I'm sure it was very disappointing for her. Yes, being overheard saying, firstly, she was very irritated. She didn't know who was coming and who wasn't. And then she was also overheard the same conversation saying that they talk and they don't do. And that is very much the emphasis of COP26, the fact that it's urgent, that so much more is done, and I think the Queen would have been tremendously helpful in this regard. I think there's no doubt about it. But it makes sense given the situation at the moment and the fact that she is performing light duties. There's a smiling Queen on the front page of the Telegraph, and we must be grateful, I think, for that, because she will be giving a pre-recorded video message, and that is something she excels in, talking virtually. And I think that we ought to be grateful. At least things seem to be moving in the right direction.
I mean, the Queen working from home, rather than saying, let's hope things return to normal, this is the new normal. She's 95. We should cut her some slack. Let's face it, there are other members of the family who can take on much of this work, and perhaps this is the moment we refocus and look at the next generation and the generation after that, which is what they've been trying to get us to do for ages.
No, absolutely. And in fact, there was a report earlier in the week that when the Queen performs engagements in the future, she will be accompanied by another member of the royal family. So in case there's a need for adjustment at the last minute and she's unable to go, the other member of the royal family, because she hates letting anyone down, will deputise for her. So that makes sense. And yes, absolutely, we're in an era where there has been clearly such a radical change to so many people's lives. And it's worth remembering that during the pandemic, it's the Queen's virtual broadcasts have been the focal point of inspiration for the nation, initially when she quoted Dame Vera Lynn's We'll Meet Again, which I thought was so moving. Subsequently, the VE Day broadcast, the 75-year anniversary, and of course she was talking about her own reminiscences of the actual day. And of course, there was her Christmas broadcast. So she's an expert at this. And I think things hopefully will be balanced in a more careful way, because she did a tremendous amount in recent weeks, the opening of the Scottish and Welsh Parliaments, which is so significant as a symbol of national unity. And don't forget her trip to Ascot, because there's no more expert person in the world on equine matters. She was receiving an award, and also there was the visit to Westminster Abbey, and it was noted that she was using a stick. So I think you're right. I mean, I think this is a matter of that she is 95, that obviously there will be adjustments, because the adjustments in recent years, apart from no long-haul flights, some of them have been very carefully planned so that it hasn't focused on the fact that the Queen is a role model for persons of advanced age. But at 95, it's only wise to reassess after this.
And as we as we approach Christmas, would you imagine that the Queen will then very much wind down, or are there going to be events that she will want to be present at, Richard, would you imagine?
Well, clearly an appearance at the cenotaph, I think, is absolutely pivotal, because this really has enormous significance for her. And how events will be balanced will obviously depend on her state of health and medical advice. But knowing the Queen, and she said, "I must be seen to be believed," I think we'll be seeing as much of her as she is, with medical advice, able to manage. And I think she'll do as much as she possibly can, as she always has, because she knows the importance of appearing in person where it's possible. Equally, we know she's an absolute master of the virtual address.
Richard, always good to see you. Battling through police sirens. It wasn't for you, was it?
No, it's not my end. Not that I heard.
Oh,
God. Must be for us. Crimes against fashion.
Yeah, well, right, I wonder why.
Richard, it's always good to see you.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Richard Fitzwilliams there.
Crimes against fashion. Right, let's have a look at what else is going on today. And criminal charges have not been ruled out in a fatal shooting by the actor Alec Baldwin on the set of his new Western film. Baldwin shot and killed Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust last week, being told the gun he was handed was not loaded. In an interview, though, with the New York Times, Santa Fe County District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwee said it was incorrect to refer to the firearm used in the incident as a prop gun, adding it was a legit gun and it was an antique-era appropriate gun. The prosecutor also said that an enormous amount of bullets had been found on the set. An investigation was needed into the nature of that ammunition.
A damning report by MPs has found that the £37 billion NHS test and trace service has been an eye-wateringly expensive failure. According to the Public Accounts Committee, it failed to break chains of COVID transmission, prevent lockdowns or enable people to return to a more normal way of life. Spending on test and trace is equal to nearly a fifth of the 2020-2021 NHS England budget.
Former Met police officer Wayne Couzens is seeking permission to appeal against the whole-life term he was handed for the murder of Sarah Everard. The Met firearms officer used COVID powers to conduct a fake arrest of the 33-year-old marketing executive as she walked home from a friend's house in March. A court official confirmed yesterday that they had been notified that an appeal has been lodged by Mr Couzens. If permission is granted, the case will be heard by the Court of Appeal Criminal Division.
More than 80,000 children aged between 12 and 15 have been booked in online to receive their COVID-19 vaccinations. A total of more than 2.5 million letters are landing on doorsteps this week, inviting parents to book a jab for their child this half-term through the National Booking Service. Vaccines have been available to 12 to 15-year-olds in England since September the 20th, but so far the rollout has been delivered mostly in schools.
A US government panel voted overwhelmingly to recommend the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children aged 5 to 11 years old, saying that the benefits of the shot outweigh the risks. The Food and Drug Administration experts backed the move yesterday, paving the way for emergency authorization within a matter of weeks. The US is already giving the vaccine to those aged 12 and over. This latest decision affects some 28 million children in the United States.
Face coverings are now mandatory for everyone working in the House of Commons, except MPs. In updated guidance, the Commons authorities say all staff, visitors, contractors and press must cover their faces to combat the spread of COVID. But it remains up to individual MPs to decide whether to follow suit. Many Conservatives have chosen not to. Sajid Javid says he will wear a mask for today's budget when the chamber will be packed. But the Health Secretary says it is a personal decision for ministers and backbenchers as to whether they will too.
Coming up, calls are growing for more financial support to clear the NHS backlog in today's budget. But will the Chancellor Rishi Sunak deliver? We'll discuss that after the weather.
Hello, very good morning to you. Well, there's a lot of wet weather to come over the next few days. Through today, we've got some persistent rain across western parts of the UK, and it's windy and mild. And that's all down to this air coming up from the southwest. But we've got this weather front here, and that's becoming pretty persistent through the day today, not moving very quickly, very far. We've got weather warnings in place across northern England through today, but as we go into Thursday, we'll have one in for Wales as well. Let's take a look at where that rain is at the moment then. We've got some pretty heavy rain across southern Scotland and Cumbria. It's just clearing out of Northern Ireland. It's gradually trickling its way slowly southwards. A lot of cloud in the sky elsewhere. A few sunny breaks developing to the east of higher ground through Wednesday afternoon, but with strong winds, it will feel quite gusty around the coastal areas, despite, though, temperatures getting up to 18, that's 64 in Fahrenheit. As we go through Wednesday evening then, we'll continue to see that rain pushing its way slowly southwards, becoming heavier then across northwest Wales and eventually getting into more of Wales as we go into the early hours of Thursday. Again, ahead of it, we'll see a lot of cloud in the sky, another very mild picture over into the early hours of Thursday, but just starting to turn a little bit cooler in the far northwest of Scotland, 9 degrees there in Stornoway, 48 Fahrenheit, compared to 12 degrees there in London. Now, as we go through into Thursday, what have we got on the cards? More in the way of rain across these western areas. It really is going to persist, and I think those totals will start to build up. So expect some surface water flooding on the roads, the risk of some flash flooding as well in places. Do take care if you are planning any journey. Still dry across southeast England through the day. Some sunshine developing here. A much, much brighter day for Northern Ireland. A few showers coming in across Scotland, and still on the mild side across the board. Now, as we go into the Halloween weekend, it stays fairly unsettled, further strong winds and the risk of some heavy rain at times too. Our temperatures begin to slide away, though, as we go into Sunday. I'll see you very soon. Take care.
Coming up to 20 minutes to 8, you're watching the Great British. This is only coffee.
Put your suit back on.
The Great British Breakfast with Kirsty and Simon. Now, astronomers have spotted what they believe to be the first known planet in another galaxy. The planet, niftily named M51-ULS-1b, was allegedly found in the Whirlpool galaxy. Nightmare to service. Anyway, more than 4,800 planets have been discovered orbiting stars other than our own sun, but all were inside the Milky Way.
Well, Mark Thompson, science broadcaster and journalist, joins us now to tell us more about this fabulous discovery. Good morning to you, Mark. Just how exciting is this, firstly, before we talk more about it?
Well, do you know, as you just said, we've discovered over nearly 5,000 other planets around other stars within our galaxy. Now, our galaxy, the Milky Way, is our local galaxy, and to have found nearly 5,000 planets itself is really good news, because it shows us that planetary formation is common, at least within our galaxy. But we had no idea we thought and presumed they would exist in other galaxies, but never discovered anything. Typically, it's very hard to see planets or discover planets that far away because of the distance. But to find the first planet in a distant galaxy shows us that it must be common across the entire universe. And of course, if there's planets out there, then that increases the chances of finding life too.
Well, does it? I mean, if Elon Musk is watching you now, and we all want to leave this planet every now and then, given what's going on here. If he packed his bags, got into his spaceship, how long would it take him to get there?
You know what? I've not done the calculations, but it would take millions upon millions upon millions of years. I think your best chance are probably to try and head to some of the planets in our galaxy, rather than trying to head to the planet in M51, which is millions of light years away. So even if you travelled at the speed of light, which is about 300,000 kilometres a second, it would still take you millions of years to get there. And I don't think his rockets can go quite that fast just yet.
But they don't have a budget day today.
So it's great knowledge, it's exciting, but really, what do we do with this going forward? What do we do with this knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, discovering planets and other galaxies, pretty much useless for us practically, other than the knowledge that it gives us that planetary formation is common. And I think what it does is it gives us a different angle on the chance, the search for life. And, I think that's one of the big unanswered questions in physics, is whether, well, across the world, of course, is whether life exists in the universe, other than here on planet Earth, I should add. And if it does, then it's got to live somewhere. So if we can find that planets are scattered across the universe, and there's theories that suggest that there's more planets in the universe than there are grains of sand on the Earth. And if that's the case, then, the chances of finding life out there are much higher.
I find this so fascinating, like you do and many others. So a signal was picked up by a Russian satellite, is that correct?
Yeah, so it's very, it's hard enough to find planets around stars in our own galaxy. And there's a number of different techniques that we use to do that. But this particular planet was picked up because there's something called an X-ray binary star, where there's two stars orbiting around each other. One of them's dead, and the dead star is sucking material off the other star, and that gives off bursts of X-ray radiation. And what we did very simply is we managed to detect the planet by the fact that it passed in front of the X-ray radiation, and there was like this little flash or little blink, if you like, from the X-ray radiation, which tells us that there was something passed in front of it, and they've managed to rule out gas clouds and other potential phenomena, which leaves us to the only conclusion that it must have been a planet.
Mark, if we know that there's this planet in another galaxy all that far away, what's the chance that there's a planet a long, long, long way away that's just discovered us?
It's possible. It's absolutely possible. Again, the distances make it very difficult for us, or for any. So if there is a civilization out there, then it's very difficult. We're talking about technology far in advance to our own. So there's a possibility that if there's aliens out there, that they've discovered Earth, but the chances and the practicalities of them actually visiting and coming along here are far smaller, because the time it takes to develop such technologies. Now, we're probably a good few, maybe thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years away from that sort of technology. So, I think people's worry about aliens invading, I think, is something we don't need to worry about too much.
Imagine them travelling all that way, getting here and then finding it's budget day.
I know. Or watching some of our other TV shows, of course. You see, if they're watching some of the soap operas, it's going to just put them off, and they're going to head straight back home again.
Oh, I think there's lots of things.
They'll watch the Great British Breakfast and realise there's no intelligent life anywhere.
I want to know.
Oh, harsh.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm used to this. No. What happens now then so there's this news, we're talking about it, we have been for the last 2 days, it's very exciting in your world, quite rightly. What happens now as we, look for signs of life there? Will the Russians plough loads of money in to investigate further? To me, this 28 million light years away thing is just like another world, literally. But what happens now with this sort of investigative, scientific, whatever it is?
There's a question.
Knowledge. I think is the word you're after.
Knowledge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, what we'll do next is we can use techniques called spectroscopy. So you've all seen a rainbow. in the sky, and a rainbow is there because sunlight passes through drops of water in the atmosphere, and those drops of water act like a prism, and they split the light up into all its individual components. And what we can do is we can use instruments that work in the same way as those drops of water, and they split the light from distant objects into their component parts. We get a spectrum of the system that we're looking at, and we can sort of learn lots about the properties of the object that's sending that light, and we can learn about the materials that it's made up of, and all sorts of other different properties. And so we'll be sort of studying the light that came from this object to see if we can learn a little bit more about the nature of it.
It's fabulous.
Oh,
fabulous.
Mind blown.
Just wonderful. I could talk about it in space for years, light years. Mark, thank you.
Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much. Should we talk about the budget?
Let's come back to something of a bump. Chancellor's budget.
That was so nice, wasn't it? Just for a minute, just to go...
28 million light years away.
Yeah, and just to go somewhere else for just a moment. Anyway,
welcome back.
Down to earth. Yes, the Chancellor's budget is committing an extra £5.9 billion in funding to NHS England to address the backlog of patients waiting for tests and scans. It's hoped that the money will be used to source new diagnostic tests, update hospital equipment, create new beds and overhaul the IT systems. With more than 5 million people waiting for hospital treatment in England, well, the local government association is one body that has been absolutely pushing for additional funding for months.
Well, let's talk about this, whether that £5.9 billion will be enough to make any difference. David Fothergill, chairman of the Local Government Association's Community and Wellbeing Board. David, thank you very much for joining us this morning. There's no specific allocation for social care, and if without any adjustment to that, does this make any difference?
Well, good morning to you both. It's quite difficult to follow the last subject, but I'm
Sorry about that.
We're going to talk about some really important stuff for some really important, vulnerable people. No, the 5.9 billion that's been put aside is really not going to have any impact upon social care at the moment. And I suppose my message is that you can't fix the NHS by fixing hospitals. You have to fix the whole system. And part of the integral part of the system is actually social care. So if we can't get people out of hospital and back to living in their homes, back to giving them domiciliary care or helping them into a residential care setting, we can't get them out of hospital, then the NHS is blocked. And it doesn't matter how much money you spend on the NHS. If you don't fix social care, you're not going to really fix it at all.
Let's talk, David, about this backlog. Money going towards this. I mean, is it an equipment problem, a staffing problem, or both?
I would imagine that it's all those things for them, but I think the most of the money is being spent on diagnostics and how we can improve and that. And I absolutely get that. I understand that people need to receive that treatment, and for my own family as well as everybody else's, that's really, really important. But we've always run the NHS on a very narrow bed margin. So if you like, it's... Unlike other countries, we have a very low number of beds available, and that relies upon being able to move people out. Now, if you can't move people out, then you absolutely block the system, and we can only move people out if we can get them home or we can get them into a care setting, and that's the problem. I'll give you an example. At the moment within Somerset, which is where I'm speaking from, we have something like 140 beds which are filled by people that could go home if we could provide the level of care for them. But we can't get the level of care because we can't get the staff. The demands on the system because of COVID and because of care leavers leaving the system and because of double vaccination requirements, we cannot provide that level of care, and therefore those 140 people sit in the system until we can. That blocks 140 people coming into the system to get their treatment. Now, you can't resolve this in hospital. You can only resolve it by spending money on social care and making sure that we've got the workforce that can provide that level of care for those people.
Mad is the issue of waste. Here we have a front page story this morning about the test and trace system costing £37 billion, and it's been described as an eye-watering waste of cash. The sense that any money put into the NHS is good money after bad. How do you address that?
You know, I suppose I can get quite sceptical about the money that's just put into some of these initiatives. My main argument is very much about social care, and I'm pleased the NHS supporters, they see that we are one system. But, you know, if we just had 1.5 billion now, we could really stabilise the care market. If we had about 2.5 to 3 billion, we could actually raise the standard of care that we're providing. These are not, in the overall scheme of things, big figures. They are important figures. You know, let's really get it down to basics. And I'm sorry, you have been talking about the other side of the universe, but let's get it down to your mother, your father, your grandmother, your next door neighbour, your elderly relative that really needs some personal hygiene care. Now, if they can't receive that personal hygiene care, they can't be at home. And if we can't put them into a care home, they have to stay in hospital. It's that simple. So spend as much money as we like on test and trace, spend as much money as we like on diagnostics, but let's get the system fixed. Let's get people out of hospital. Let's get them back into their own homes and let's give them the right support. It's not difficult. It's just obvious. But unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people making a lot of noise today about the spending review and about the budget that will drown out the noise for this vulnerable group of people. And all we're trying to do with our NHS colleagues is just to wave that flag.
Yeah, David, my sister runs a care company, and she would argue vehemently that the body you represent, local government, has taken their eye off the ball for years on this. They haven't been putting the money in that needed to go into social care. The group you represent is as culpable as anybody in not putting money where your mouth is.
Well, I'd certainly like to have that conversation with your sister because we get our money through government and we get it from council tax, and we've been investing heavily into this area. What we've done over the course of the last 2 or 3 years is we've moved to supporting people much more in their home because that's where they do best. That's where people recover quickest. So we've supported people in their home. But we just can't get that staff now. We've lost those people, whether it's Brexit, because of COVID, because of double vaccinations, because of other online retailers coming in and offering large salaries, or hospitality, whatever it is. We just do not have the staff to provide that domiciliary care. So this is the immediate issue. We can talk
David,
about history.
it's because they're not being paid enough, David. Doesn't matter where they come from.
Absolutely. Which is why we need an extra 1.5 billion now into the social care system so we can raise wages and pay people a decent wage and give them the recognition that they need. That's all we're asking.
And entice the right staff. OK, well, David, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Good to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Coming up, your traditional roast turkey at Christmas time may be in great peril after farmers warn of produce shortages due to hit shops this winter. We look into why that is.
Here we go, another shortage. Let's have the weather first.
Yes, well, you love this, don't you?
Hello, very good morning to you. Well, there's a lot of wet weather to come over the next few days. Through today, we've got some persistent rain across western parts of the UK, and it's windy and mild. And that's all down to this air coming up from the southwest. But we've got this weather front here, and that's becoming pretty persistent through the day today, not moving very quickly, very far. We've got weather warnings in place across northern England through today, but as we go into Thursday, we'll have one in for Wales as well. Let's take a look at where that rain is at the moment then. We've got some pretty heavy rain across southern Scotland and Cumbria. It's just clearing out of Northern Ireland. It's gradually trickling its way slowly southwards. A lot of cloud in the sky elsewhere. A few sunny breaks developing to the east of higher ground through Wednesday afternoon, but with strong winds, it will feel quite gusty around the coastal areas. Despite, though, temperatures getting up to 18, that's 64 in Fahrenheit. As we go through Wednesday evening then, we'll continue to see that rain pushing its way slowly southwards, becoming heavier then across northwest Wales and eventually getting into more of Wales as we go into the early hours of Thursday. Again, ahead of it, we'll see a lot of cloud in the sky, another very mild picture over into the early hours of Thursday, but just starting to turn a little bit cooler in the far northwest of Scotland, 9 degrees there in Stornoway, 48 Fahrenheit, compared to 12 degrees there in London. Now, as we go through into Thursday, what have we got on the cards? More in the way of rain across these western areas. It really is going to persist, and I think those totals will start to build up. So expect some surface water flooding on the roads, the risk of some flash flooding as well in places. Do take care if you are planning any journey. Still dry across southeast England through the day. Some sunshine developing here. A much, much brighter day for Northern Ireland. A few showers coming in across Scotland, and still on the mild side across the board. Now, as we go into the Halloween weekend, it stays fairly unsettled, further strong winds and the risk of some heavy rain at times too. Our temperatures begin to slide away, though, as we go into Sunday. I'll see you very soon. Take care. Good morning. Welcome back.
We're about to do a story about the lack of British turkeys, but there are two here.
Let's talk about that too. Now, MPs have been warned that there will likely be a shortage. We're also about shortages of UK-produced turkeys for Christmas. Don't panic. With produce having to be imported from Europe.
Does a Polish turkey taste different from a British turkey?
Farming bosses say that their farming facilities are being mothballed and that huge quantities of produce are going to waste due to labour shortages. I mean, which is not funny. Turkeys may have to be imported from Europe to meet those demands. I do hate waste, and especially when it's animals.
Right.
Do you want to do the sport?
No, I don't.
Right, OK.
This is the moment where Kirsty brings us the sport.
It's only a quick look. There was another busy evening of sporting action as Arsenal, Chelsea and Sunderland. Leeds were in action. Were you interested about?
No, tell us about Chelsea and Sunderland.
OK, they all made it through to the Carabao Cup quarter-finals. Callum Chambers scored with his first touch as Arsenal beat Leeds, Simon's team, who he doesn't really care about, 2-0 at the Emirates to extend the Gunners' unbeaten run to 8 games. Chelsea survived a scare to edge Southampton 4-3 on penalties after a 1-1 draw. Brilliant match at Stamford Bridge. Kai Havertz opened the scoring before Che Adams equalised for the away side early in the second half, but like the last round, Reece James converted the winning penalty for the hosts. Elsewhere, Ellen White closed in on Kelly Smith's all-time scoring record, and Ella Toone scored her first hat-trick for the Lionesses as England thumped Latvia 10-0, as we mentioned earlier on, in World Cup qualifying. And Wales women also enjoyed a positive night, beating Estonia 4-0, while Northern Ireland, they were held to a 2-2 draw by Austria. Finally, tennis. Emma Raducanu secured her maiden WTA Tour match win at the Transylvania Open in Romania. US Open champion came from a set behind to beat Slovenia's Polona Herko in 3 sets. She'll face Romania's Anna Bogdan in the round of 16 tomorrow. And this is a great sports story. Hollywood star and Wrexham co-owner, if you didn't know, Ryan Reynolds, took fans by surprise last night as he actually watched his team in action in the stands for the first time. Have a look. Deadpool actor took 100% control of the Welsh club.
Is he in that picture?
We'll show you the close-up in a minute.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. There it is. Just a little view from outside. The Wrexham Supporters Trust in February took control after his bid was approved by fans, and why should it not be? But he may have wished to stay at home because they were defeated 3-2 by Maidenhead United. It's still great, isn't it, that?
Stories like that do cheer you up. And he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Well, he's there.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's got there, you know, it's good to actually be there and not just be talking about it and controlling it.
Right.
We got any interesting emails this morning?
Can
you read any of them? That's the question.
Alan says, is it not the case the NHS can't cope due to increased population? And goes on to talk more about that. Which I won't read to you right now. Gary.
Skim reading. We're very good at this now.
It's always slightly dangerous to open it up for the first time.
We've learnt very much to pick and choose.
Gary says, funny, I was at my butcher's the other day and ordered my turkey. He said they were going cheap, which is unusual for turkeys.
And plentiful. Oh, God. Goodness.
I just made that up. No, he says they were going cheap and plentiful at present. But when the hospitality industry start Christmas parties, that's when the trouble starts.
Oh, is it?
Ah.
OK, let's know your views on any of the subjects we're talking about. See you in a minute.
Turkey's going cheap.
It's Wednesday, the 27th of October. These are the stories
that out on Twitter.
That matter to you and to us on the Great British Breakfast. It'll be out there later with Simon McCoy and Kirsty Gallagher.
Very good morning to you. Now, after days of leaks, it really is budget day.
Is it?
We're just hours away from Chancellor Rishi Sunak unveiling his autumn budget as he promises it begins the work of preparing for a new economy post-COVID. And we're asking you, what do you want to see in the budget? Let us know at GBViews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBNews.
Meanwhile, a damning new report finds the NHS test and trace scheme has been an eye-watering, they say, waste of taxpayers' money. We'll explain why. That's despite the £37 billion in funding, and asking, will anyone be held responsible?
Also, former Met Police officer Wayne Couzens is seeking leave to appeal against the whole life term he was handed for the murder of Sarah Everard.
And criminal charges have not been ruled out in the fatal accidental shooting by actor Alec Baldwin. Well, why the local district attorney says a criminal prosecution is still very much on the table.
Plus, the ultimate cop-out. Her Majesty the Queen is forced to pull out of the COP26 summit next week. Regrettably, it said, following medical advice to rest.
So good morning to you. Let's have a look at some of today's front pages then, starting with the Daily Telegraph, who splashes on a report suggesting how the government's test and trace scheme, as we mentioned, has been an eye-watering waste of taxpayers' money, despite that £37 billion in funding.
The Queen has, as we've just said, regretfully pulled out of the COP26 summit in Glasgow. That's on doctors' advice. That's on the front page of the Eye.
Moving on to the Daily Mail, splashing out again on how the Queen has pulled out of the COP26 summit, which starts next week, with a decision announced after a secret hospital stay, they said.
The Daily Mirror reports how the Queen has been told to rest at home instead of meeting world leaders at the COP26 summit.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak's plans to usher in a new age of optimism when he unveils his budget is the lead story for the Daily Express today.
The Daily Star reports on how actress Joanna Lumley apparently wants to bring back rationing in a bid to rescue the planet.
That's a quick look at the front pages. Now, Chancellor Rishi Sunak will be announcing his full budget this afternoon, but has already released quite a lot, actually. Some details of what it may contain. One such detail was his pledge to raise the minimum wage from £8.91 an hour to £9.50. However, in this post-pandemic economy, where small businesses have already suffered greatly, is this pay rise placing undue pressure on pubs, shops and hotels that are still really struggling to survive, or will it actually help attract new staff?
And let's have a look at what else is going on today. And criminal charges have not been ruled out in the fatal shooting by the actor Alec Baldwin on the set of his new Western film. Baldwin shot and killed Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust last week, after being told the gun he was handed was not loaded. In an interview with the New York Times, Santa Fe County District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwiz said it was incorrect to refer to the firearm used in the incident as a prop gun, adding it was a legit gun and it was an antique-era appropriate gun. The prosecutor also said that an enormous amount of bullets had been found on the set and an investigation was needed into the nature of that ammunition.
A damning report by MPs has found that the government's £37 billion NHS test and trace scheme has been an eye-wateringly expensive failure. The Public Accounts Committee says the scheme failed to break chains of COVID transmission, prevent lockdowns or enable people to return to a more normal way of life. Spending on test and trace is equal to nearly a fifth of the 2020-21 NHS England budget.
The former Metropolitan Police officer Wayne Couzens is seeking permission to appeal his whole life sentence for the murder of Sarah Everard. Couzens used COVID powers to conduct a fake arrest of the 33-year-old marketing executive as she walked home from a friend's house in March. A court official has confirmed that they have been notified of an appeal by Mr. Couzens. If permission is granted, the case will be heard at the Court of Appeal.
More than 80,000 children aged between 12 and 15 have been booked in online to receive their COVID-19 vaccinations. A total of more than 2.5 million letters are landing on doorsteps this week, inviting parents to book a jab for their child this half-term through the National Booking Service. Vaccines have been available to 12 to 15-year-olds in England since September 20th, but so far the rollout has been delivered mostly in schools.
A US government panel voted overwhelmingly to recommend the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children aged 5 to 11, saying the benefits of the jab outweigh the risks. The Food and Drug Administration backed the move yesterday, paving the way for emergency authorization within a matter of weeks. The US is already giving the vaccine to those aged 12 and over. The latest decision affects some 28 million children in the United States.
Legendary US comedian and political satirist Mort Sahl has died. A friend of Mr. Sahl told AP News that he passed away yesterday in California at the age of 94. Sahl's biting political commentary won him legions of fans starting in the 1950s and has been credited as the inspiration for modern stand-up comedy.
Look at the sports news. A quick recap of the Women's World Cup qualifying rounds, and starting with England, where Ella Toone scored a hat-trick on what she called a special night as the team hit 10 goals against Latvia to maintain their 100% record in the Women's World Cup qualifying. Meanwhile, Wales treated a record crowd of 5,455, I'll give you their names if you want them, at the Cardiff City Stadium to a dominant display as they thrashed Estonia 4-0. Northern Ireland suffered late heartache as Stephanie Enzinger's stoppage-time equaliser denied them what would have been a famous win over Austria at Seaview.
Quick view of the weather today. Northwestern England, southern Scotland and the far north of Wales will be cloudy and wet. Elsewhere, drier, but mostly cloudy with some sunny spells in Northern Ireland. A mild day.
Coming up on the programme, the Queen is set to miss the COP26 climate conference. We'll take a look at what this may mean for her health. That's to come here on the Great British Breakfast.
morning. Welcome back to the Great British Breakfast. It's coming up to 8:10. Now, although we've received many budget updates concerning minimum wage, NHS funding and new skills workshops, we've yet to receive much update on what the property market can expect from the Chancellor. There are suggestions that the government will be building 160,000 new homes on brownfield land, as we've discussed this week. But an increase of spending brought on by the demands of the pandemic could mean an increase in property taxes, affecting how much money potential home buyers have in their pockets.
Well, joining us now is the former Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick. Robert, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
What do you want to hear today? Robert, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry,
Right. I was just wondering what you'd like to hear from the Chancellor today.
Well, look, like many people, I'm concerned about the cost of living, and so I'd like to see the Chancellor considering carefully how we can help more people through quite an uncertain period, particularly with high levels of inflation and energy prices. And I think there are some attractive options available to him there, like, for example, the universal credit taper rate, which I know many people have been asking him to address. I want to see us looking to the future and, of course, investing in public services, but particularly trying to grow the economy. And that may mean further investment in infrastructure, for example, in the Midlands, in the North, as part of our levelling up agenda. But I also want to hear reassurance that this is a fiscally responsible government and that we're going to be prudent with the public finances, because we don't know what the future holds. Small increases in interest rates can make a big impact on the public finances. So I think striking that right balance as the economy grows between investing in the public services and protecting those people who are on lower incomes with maintaining fiscal responsibility and the government's reputation for managing the public finances prudently.
Good morning to you, Robert. I mean, we've heard much of what the Chancellor's going to say already in the last few days. Not much property news, in fact, nothing really. Is that an ominous sign, do we think, of tax increases to come?
I don't think so. I don't have any inside information to see what the Chancellor has to say on stamp duty and property taxes, but I don't think that's something that he should reach to. Personally, I think we're already very highly taxed, and so I wouldn't want to see further increases in taxation almost of any kind, and maybe there'll be opportunities now or in the future to reform or reduce taxes. But in terms of housing, what we have heard some news on, which is welcome, is something that I put forward when I was Housing Secretary, which is to invest more money in unlocking those brownfield sites in our towns and city centres, so we can both build more homes but also regenerate and renew some of those parts of our communities that have looked neglected and undervalued for too long. And so a major investment in brownfield land regeneration sounds like a very sensible and welcome step forwards.
Yeah, as you say, this has been discussed, in your words, for too long. There's a huge scandal in this country at the moment, under your watch as Secretary of State, and that is the cladding scandal. It is affecting many people around the country, living in homes that are blighted by this, living in standard of accommodation that you would not put up with, and people need help. Why is the government not helping? Isn't this budget a moment where that help can be offered?
Well, when I arrived as Housing Secretary, the government was providing around £600 million of support for those people caught up in the cladding scandal. I was able to negotiate over £4 billion more money from the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and so we now have a £5.1 billion programme to support those individuals. Is that enough money? Well, I think there is an argument to say that you could go further to provide extra support, but that's a matter for my successor, Michael Gove, and the Chancellor to discuss. The other element of this is ensuring that money isn't wasted and people aren't asked to do things which frankly aren't necessary. And particularly for the lower rise homes, we're hearing stories of serious risk aversion from the lenders and the insurers, people being asked to do works which probably aren't even required. And that requires a change in the mindset and a return to common sense and a sensible appreciation of risk, something that is starting to flow through the system, but will take time. And I'm very concerned about people being asked to spend money for things that aren't necessary, because actually the statistics show that you're at no higher risk of dying in a fire in a high-rise building than you are in a home or a bungalow. And so we've got to return to a proportionate, risk-based approach. So those are the two things we really now need to do: instill proportionality and provide potentially some extra support to those people who do need to do works because they are genuinely living in homes that aren't safe and need to be remediated as quickly as possible.
Yeah, are you confident of finding common sense anywhere?
Well, it's proven to be very difficult on this issue, at least, because there's massive risk aversion amongst all the players, and the government is just one part of the market. And so trying to instill that proportionate approach has proven to be very difficult indeed. I hope that you're starting to see the first signs of that, but it's going to take months or potentially longer for that to feed through the system and for people to start to see their bills, if they're receiving very large bills, being challenged and coming to something that's a sensible outcome for them, which either they can afford or can be paid for by the taxpayer, or better still, by the builders and the developers who got us into this situation in the first place by building the shoddy buildings.
Yeah, I mean, you served under Philip Hammond. You were Secretary to the Treasury under the Chancellor then. Just wonder what you make about the fact we seem to know more about today's budget before the budget than we probably will after. Is this the way to do it?
Well, as a backbench Member of Parliament, I want to see the House of Commons respected, and the Chancellor will be coming shortly to the Commons to do his speech. That will contain the big, important, commercially and market-sensitive announcements, like the tax measures that we've just been speculating about. Those things haven't been trailed. It's not actually unusual for a Chancellor to trail some of the more positive announcements in the days leading up to it. The Chancellors that I worked for in the past certainly did so. But it is important that the House of Commons is respected, and that we, as Members of Parliament, and you as the media, members of the public, get to hear the budget from the lips of the Chancellor rather than in the press in the days leading up to it. So the right balance needs to be struck here.
Yeah, well, OK, Robert Jenrick, former Housing Secretary, thanks so much for your time today.
Good to see you. Now, as we were just hearing, we're not far off now hearing from the Chancellor Rishi Sunak unveiling that autumn budget. The government expected to announce a military Veterans Health Innovation Fund. That's worth £5 million, and it's intended to develop new treatments both for physical injuries and mental issues such as post-traumatic stress disorder. Following the recent withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, the government has been facing fierce criticism, and the spotlight has been shone on soldiers suffering with PTSD, with some tragically taking their own lives after leaving service.
Well, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley has spoken to veterans who've struggled with their mental health to find out if they think that the budget funding is indeed enough. What have you found? Good morning, Anna.
Good morning, Kirsty and Simon. Yes, I've been reporting on this story throughout the morning. You'll see it's got a little bit lighter now, so you can see that there's the Hull cenotaph here behind me where we honour those fallen during the wars. And yes, this £5 million funding for veterans is to be announced this afternoon. It's over an unspecified time frame, but the government have said it will be to invest in new technologies to help amputees and blast victims, and it will also be to invest in mental health for veterans. Some of them do find it very difficult after they've left service to adjust back to civilian life. They develop PTSD and they go on to have suicidal thoughts, some of them, and some sadly do take their own lives. This funding has come after the £10 million that was announced by the Chancellor back in March for mental health funding for veterans, and there was also £6 million allocated to armed forces charities in the summer as a result of the pandemic and the funding that they'd lost for that. I have been speaking to veterans about what they think to this £5 million that's been allocated, and one of them was Anthony Mason. He first joined the army when he was just 16 years old. He served for 24 years. He was in the Royal Signals. Sadly, when he left, he did try to take his life on 2 occasions because he struggled so much with his mental health. And this is what he had to say to me.
I just felt, well, abandoned, really. felt abandoned. I hate to admit it, obviously being a roughy tufty squaddy, but I was very vulnerable, I suppose. Lost, in despair. I didn't know what to do with my life. Yeah, very lost. That's pretty much when things started going wrong. And upon things going wrong, it took a lot. It took a lot for me to ask for help. But I got to that point in my life, I thought, well, I have to. So I really felt as though I was going absolutely crazy. So I asked for help, and that's luckily I got in touch with Project Nova, who sent me the direction of PTSD resolution, who then got a mental health counsellor to talk to me, which improved my life tenfold. I attempted to take my own life on 2 occasions, and then I actually admitted myself to a mental health hospital, which was actually very difficult, believe it or not. But I got there in the end, and having spent, I think I was in there, because I admitted myself, I could leave at any point. Well, I loved it in there. It was absolutely fantastic because they did so much good for me. And I felt absolutely on top of the world when I came out, and kind of started going downhill again. So, and that's when I got in touch with the Project Nova, etc., and PTSD resolution, and having the mental health counsellors there, and I spoke to them on a weekly basis. I think it was a weekly or fortnightly basis. And I'd say after that, my life started improving, and I started forgetting all the lifted off and trivia in my life, if you want to call it that, the bad things, and that's when I moved on. You just want to struggle through. But as I've realised now, asking for help isn't a weakness. I used to see it as a weakness. It's not a weakness at all. You shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. And like I've explained to my good friends, it's not a weakness asking for help. It's helped me tenfold. So why not go and do it yourself?
Anthony there sharing his experiences of what it was like getting back into civilian life, and him encouraging other veterans to come forward and get that support if they need it. We discussed the £5 million funding. He did say that, you know, it was welcomed, but he also felt that this wasn't enough money to help those veterans who have helped our country and helped Britain.
Very much fascinating. Anna Riley there with the update on that.
Now, Insulate Britain protesters, I can hardly say it, are at it again. As we know, GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White joins us now with the latest. Good morning to you, Mark. Do we know much about what they're going to do next, or where they're going to be, or what's happening with them?
Morning. No word from them officially. Normally about this time or even a bit earlier I would get a message on WhatsApp group from them alerting us to the fact that they've started a protest somewhere. Nothing as yet. And of course we had the news release from them yesterday talking about potential action around the M25, asking drivers to slow down to 20 miles an hour. Well, of course, if you've ever been on the orbital motorway at the height of rush hour, you'd be lucky to do 20 miles an hour anyway. But everybody, of course, braced for the potential for more action around the M25. But, you know, you ever had your feeling that you've been played a little? There's nothing coming through for the M25 at the moment. I am getting word, but it's unconfirmed at the moment, that there might be a protest on the A40 this morning. I just need to bottom that out a bit further for you before I bring you any more detail on that. But regardless, this, if it goes ahead today, will be the 15th time that they've mounted direct action. There are offshoots, of course, who've been mounting action as well, and government offices in Westminster yesterday, the Science Museum overnight. It seems to be that we're setting in for a pattern here of activist groups all pushing the same ultimate agenda of climate change, animal welfare and alike, that want to take direct action to seize the headlines to get the message across. And that seems to be the protests the process, I should say, that they are going to embark in. They know it's upsetting many people, understandably. People are rightly furious about the inconvenience that they have been subjected to. But I think they've made a calculation, and the calculation is that this direct action is getting people talking about them. Remember, just a month or two ago, we were talking about Insulate Britain. It was Insulate Who. We were getting them confused constantly with Extinction Rebellion, even though they are an offshoot of Extinction Rebellion. Well, everybody knows Insulate Britain's name now. We're talking about it. It's right up there. In that sense, you know, they've achieved a goal, a significant goal, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you say we've been played a little. We've been played a lot this morning. Here are you and I talking about something that hasn't even happened yet. We've got Insulate Britain up there on the screen. I mean, you and I have been around a bit. We've all been around a bit. And, you know, we're giving them the publicity that they seek, that they crave, that without which they wouldn't go and do this. Is there a moment where we in the media say, look, let's just ignore them for a couple of weeks and they'll go away?
You know, I have to agree with you. I really do. My heart sank when I was asked to come on and do another live hit.
So did ours.
With you
So
this
did ours. I'm
morning.
sorry, Mark. Ours did too.
It's not just the early rise, I promise you. But yeah, you know, we are absolutely playing into their hands in giving them the oxygen of publicity, in talking about it, in putting it right up there. But I guess there's a counter argument as well. They are causing very significant disturbance to people and inconvenience to people in this area of England and the southeast around the orbital motorway and in central London. It is causing significant disruption. So there is a news element there. Our viewers are rightly angered, but I think they're kind of divided between people who are angry about it, want us to discuss it and, you know, challenge what Insulate Britain are doing, and others who say don't give them any more publicity. So it's a hard one, but yeah, I'm a bit conflicted on it, I have to say.
We all are. All I want to give them is some extra tubes of glue.
You're some cookie.
Mark, you're brilliant. Thank you so much. Again, sorry, A, to get you up, B, to be talking about Insulate. But
Yeah,
maybe
I suspect you will be talking about something later on this morning.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't be. But anyway, yes, we're all in the same predicament. OK,
Right.
Moving on. Here's what else is going on today.
Probably
Calm
get
down.
into deep trouble for that. But
Well,
anyway.
no, it's true, though, that you're in deep trouble.
No change there. It's a weekday.
It is. It is a difficult one. We get lots of emails about it. You know, you are giving them oxygen, but then we do also feel that we have to discuss it at points. Anyway, let's have a look at some other stories today. And criminal charges have not been ruled out in a fatal shooting by the actor Alec Baldwin on the set of his new Western film. Baldwin shot and killed Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust last week after being told the gun he was handed was not loaded. In an interview with the New York Times, Santa Fe County District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwies said it was incorrect to refer to the firearm used in the incident as a prop gun, adding it was a legit gun and it was an antique-era appropriate gun. The prosecutor also said that an enormous amount of bullets had been found on the set and an investigation was needed into the nature of that ammunition.
A damning report by MPs has found that the £37 billion NHS Test and Trace Service has been an eye-wateringly expensive failure. According to the Public Accounts Committee, failed to break chains of COVID transmission, to prevent lockdowns or enable people to return to more normal ways of life. Spending on tests and traces equal to nearly a fifth of the NHS England budget for 2020-2021.
Former Met police officer Wayne Couzens is seeking permission to appeal against the whole life term he was handed for the murder of Sarah Everard. The Met firearms officer used COVID powers to conduct a fake arrest of the 33-year-old marketing executive as she walked home from a friend's house in March. A court official confirmed yesterday that they had been notified that an appeal had been lodged by Mr Couzens. If permission is granted, the case will be heard by the Court of Appeal Criminal Division.
More than 80,000 children aged between 12 and 15 have been booked in online to receive their COVID-19 vaccinations. A total of more than 2.5 million letters are landing on doorsteps this week, inviting parents to book a jab for their child this half-term through the National Booking Service. Vaccines have been available to 12 to 15-year-olds in England since September the 20th, but so far the rollout has been delivered mostly in schools.
A US government panel voted overwhelmingly to recommend the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children aged 5 to 11 years old, saying that the benefits of the shot outweigh the risks. The Food and Drug Administration experts backed the move yesterday, paving the way for emergency authorization within a matter of weeks. The US have already given the vaccine to those aged 12 and over. This latest decision affects some 28 million children in the United States.
Face coverings are now mandatory for everyone working in the House of Commons, except MPs. In updated guidance, the Commons authorities say all staff, visitors, contractors and press must cover their faces to combat the spread of COVID. But it remains up to individual MPs to decide whether or not they should follow suit. Many Conservatives have chosen not to. Sajid Javid says he will wear a mask for today's budget when the chamber will be packed. But the Health Secretary says it is a personal decision for ministers and backbenchers as to whether they will too.
Right, coming up, with 100 days until the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, we'll be speaking to a former Olympic skier about her preparations for the Games. But first, get the weather.
Hello, very good morning to you. Well, there's a lot of wet weather to come over the next few days. Through today, we've got some persistent rain across western parts of the UK, and it's windy and mild. And that's all down to this air coming up from the southwest. But we've got this weather front here, and that's becoming pretty persistent through the day today, not moving very quickly, very far. We've got weather warnings in place across northern England through today, but as we go into Thursday, we'll have one in for Wales as well. Let's take a look at where that rain is at the moment then. We've got some pretty heavy rain across southern Scotland and Cumbria. It's just clearing out of Northern Ireland. It's gradually trickling its way slowly southwards. A lot of cloud in the sky elsewhere. A few sunny breaks developing to the east of higher ground through Wednesday afternoon, but with strong winds, it will feel quite gusty around the coastal areas, despite, though, temperatures getting up to 18, that's 64 in Fahrenheit. As we go through Wednesday evening then, we'll continue to see that rain pushing its way slowly southwards, becoming heavier then across northwest Wales and eventually getting into more of Wales as we go into the early hours of Thursday. Again, ahead of it, we'll see a lot of cloud in the sky, another very mild picture over into the early hours of Thursday, but just starting to turn a little bit cooler in the far northwest of Scotland, 9 degrees there in Stornoway, 48 Fahrenheit, compared to 12 degrees there in London. Now, as we go through into Thursday, what have we got on the cards? More in the way of rain across these western areas. It really is going to persist, and I think those totals will start to build up. So expect some surface water flooding on the roads, the risk of some flash flooding as well in places. Do take care if you are planning any journeys. Still dry across southeast England through the day. Some sunshine developing here. A much, much brighter day for Northern Ireland. A few showers coming in across Scotland, and still on the mild side across the board. Now, as we go into the Halloween weekend, it stays fairly unsettled, further strong winds and the risk of some heavy rain at times too. Our temperatures begin to slide away, though, as we go into Sunday. I'll see you very soon. Take care.
Coming up to 25 minutes to 9, you're watching The Great British Breakfast with Kirsty Gallagher and Simon McCoy.
Good morning. Yes, it's understood the budget will announce a £3 billion investment in a skills revolution to help Brits find higher paying jobs. Well, this attempt to boost the economy will provide more opportunities for post-16 education, especially in the technology sector, through creating more places on digital skills boot camps. Let's hope that more people will then enter high-value sectors, such as those that develop artificial intelligence, cybersecurity and nuclear energy, as well as help prevent future digital crises should we experience another pandemic.
Well, someone who knows a lot about digital skills is Sam Kennett, director of the Social Hand Grenade. That's a marketing and advertising company, and Sam joins us now. A very good morning to you.
Morning.
Now, Sam, that introduction will mean nothing to anybody. But what will mean something to people is that 18 months ago, you know exactly how hard this country was suffering. You lost your job.
Yeah, I was made redundant shortly before the pandemic. And rather than going into another corporate role, I decided to set up a company for myself and put the skills that I'd learned through my career to use helping startups and small and medium-sized companies. So, yeah, this past 18 months has been a trial, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, fantastic, though, for you. And, I mean, this news today that we expect to hear from the Chancellor, I mean, this must be very welcome news, because how important is digital literacy for startups and for small businesses and for people looking to move into those higher-paying jobs?
It's massively important. My only issue with this is he seems to be plastering over a lot of cracks. Introducing people to the digital marketing world is a great thing. Everything's moving to a more online-based way of working. But it's going to take a long time for that skill gap to be closed. And in the meantime, all the other things that he's brought in, like the increase on corporation tax, especially for things like micro businesses, mean that they can't invest in outsourcing those things to people that already have the skills.
Amazing what you've done, given that 18 months ago you lost your job, you've got 2 children, your partner, I think, is a postman. I mean, just describe what the last 18 months have been like for you, and whether you think that Rishi Sunak understands what others like you have gone through.
It's been hell. He hasn't understood at all. In fact, I'm part of a group called Excluded UK, where there are 3 million of us that received no support from Rishi and his measures throughout the whole pandemic. And in fact, for quite a long time of it, he claimed that we didn't even exist. However, we all exist when it comes to collecting our taxes.
Well, isn't that the truth? And I'm having established this business as you've done, you know, in such adverse circumstances, is there a bit of you that's worried he might just clobber you even more today?
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, small businesses especially haven't got the income in their business at the moment after the last 18 months to be able to grow and develop. Yet he is clobbering us all with increased corporation tax, increased national insurance contributions to class ones, and all of those things, which mean that we're not going to be able to grow our businesses and make a sustainable income from them. I think you will find over the next 12 months that a lot of the smaller businesses are going to end up going under.
Yeah. Tell us more about your business and those you're helping and trying to help, and those people with businesses that you are trying to keep afloat.
I specialise in web development, so I build websites, and I also do social media marketing, so helping people advertise their businesses on platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook to try and help them gain more customers. E-commerce businesses are being hit especially hard at the moment, so I'm trying to help those. I mean, with things like the HGV shortage, they're not able to get the stock in to fulfil customer orders. Not only that, but the increased cost of sourcing materials is all affecting their bottom lines, whilst we still have quite a cash-strapped consumer base. So I'm trying to kind of help businesses get back onto their feet by getting their names out there a little bit more.
And Sam, presumably these companies, I mean, the last thing anybody wants is another lockdown, encouragement to work from home. What feedback are you getting as to how near the edge some of these companies are?
Massively. A lot of people have put their whole life savings and everything that they have into starting up these businesses. You know, it's all well and good saying that we want a nation of entrepreneurs and business owners and people in high-skilled jobs. But if you haven't got that help, especially in the first 5 years of business, when you're not really going to be making a huge amount of profit, you're just not going to survive. People are losing their homes because they've just been left out in the cold.
What does that mean, left out in the cold? I mean, you say Rishi Sunak doesn't perhaps accept that you've been through what you've been through, but when you describe being out in the cold, what does that mean day to day? What does that mean as you're trying to bring 2 children up?
It means having to borrow money to pay the bills or get food in. I've always been in quite highly paid jobs. I've been fortunate that way. But this past 18 months, I've had to rely on the income of my partner, who's a postman. They work extremely long hours for not really a lot of money. With private rent as high as it is, after that's been paid, it doesn't really leave a lot of money to pay things like gas and electric, food, council tax, all of those bills that have to be paid on a monthly basis.
And that's the very, very real story, isn't it? Sam, we really appreciate you coming on. We can see how exasperating it's been for you, how upsetting it's been for you, and for many others as well, viewers watching. I'm sure we will get many emails in as well after hearing your story and what you're doing.
Congratulations on what you've done.
Absolutely.
And wish you well with that.
Yeah, well done for doing that. Thank you very much, Sam Kennett, for joining us today.
Let's have a look at what else is going on today here on the Great British Breakfast. And criminal charges have not been ruled out in the fatal shooting by the actor Alec Baldwin on the set of his new Western film. Baldwin shot and killed Helena Hutchins on the set of Rust last week after being told the gun he was handed was not loaded. In an interview with the New York Times, Santa Fe County District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwise said it was incorrect to refer to the firearm used in the incident as a prop gun, adding it was a legit gun and it was an antique-era appropriate gun. The prosecutor also said that an enormous amount of bullets had been found on the set and an investigation was needed into the nature of that ammunition.
A damning report by MPs has found that the government's £37 billion NHS test and trace scheme has been an eye-wateringly expensive failure. The Public Accounts Committee says the scheme failed to break chains of COVID transmission, prevent lockdowns or enable people to return to a more normal way of life. Spending on test and trace is equal to nearly a fifth of the 2020-21 NHS England budget.
The former Metropolitan Police officer Wayne Couzens is seeking permission to appeal his whole life sentence for the murder of Sarah Everard. Couzens used COVID powers to conduct a fake arrest of the 33-year-old marketing executive as she walked home from a friend's house in March. A court official has confirmed that they have been notified of an appeal by Mr. Couzens. If permission is granted, the case will be heard by the Court of Appeal.
More than 80,000 children aged between 12 and 15 have been booked in online to receive their COVID-19 vaccinations. A total of more than 2.5 million letters are landing on doorsteps this week, inviting parents to book a jab for their child this half-term through the National Booking Service. Vaccines have been available to 12 to 15-year-olds in England since September the 20th, but so far the rollout has been delivered mostly in schools.
A US government panel has voted overwhelmingly to recommend the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children aged 5 to 11, saying the benefits of the jab outweigh the risks. The Food and Drug Administration backed the move yesterday. That paves the way for emergency authorization within a matter of weeks. The United States is already giving the vaccine to those aged 12 and over. This latest decision affects some 28 million children in the United States.
Legendary US comedian and political satirist Mort Sahl has died. A friend of Mr. Sahl told AP News that he'd passed away yesterday in California at the age of 94. Sahl's biting political commentary won him legions of fans starting in the 1950s. He's been credited as the inspiration for modern stand-up comedy.
Quick roundup of the sports news. The Women's World Cup qualifying round starting with England. Ella Toone scored a hat-trick on what she called a special night as the team hit 10 goals against Latvia to maintain their 100% record in Women's World Cup qualifying. Meanwhile, Wales treated a record crowd of 5,455 at the Cardiff City Stadium to a dominant display as they thrashed Estonia 4-0. Northern Ireland suffered late heartache as Stephanie Enziger's stoppage time equaliser denied them what would have been a famous win over Austria at Seaview. You always laugh when I do the sport.
No, you laugh. You're laughing as you speak. Just at some of the way, the ways sports journalists write.
Well, it's partly that. It's partly
10-0. 10-0. Well, yeah, obviously, we know that.
That's proper
Right, let's
score.
keep with the sports theme because the countdown to the 2022 Winter Olympics is on with 100 days until the Games begin in China. Well, Beijing will be the first city to stage both the Summer and Winter Games. And the hosts are promising a simple and safe event, they say. Team GB will be hoping for significant improvements on their last Games after finishing 19th in the medal table.
Well, the former Olympic skier and seven-time British national champion Chemi Alcott joins us now.
Brilliant.
Sorry.
No, I love it.
You caught me visualising.
No, you're in the spirit for this.
Yeah, I thought you were in a virtual studio. Marvellous.
Morning.
So the clock is...
Good morning, guys.
How are we going to do?
I mean, it's so exciting. It feels like we've just finished getting excited about Tokyo Olympics and how much of a buzz and inspiration that was for all of us post-pandemic to get back to sport. And now we've got the Winter Olympics to look forward to. And I mean, we've never had such a strong team. I'm going to start with the ladies because the ladies we're sending, we've got Charlotte Banks, Katie Muir, Katie Ormrod. In alpine skiing, we've got Alex Tilley, who just had her PB last weekend of a 13th. So it's really exciting. We've got Dave Riding, all the alpine boys. And I'm so excited to be this side of it and not have all the pressure of being a performing athlete.
Chemi, yeah, I mean, obviously I know you very well, and I know...
Why, obviously, I don't know. I didn't know you knew her well.
I know. The pressure...
Hang on, she always says it. Does she know you well?
Yes, we've met. She's actually helped me out a lot in lockdown. Kirsty, the gem.
Oh, we are good friends. And
I was just checking.
At the pressure of being, or going into something like this, tell us how it feels. Tell us what it feels like to be sort of preparing so many. Because we spoke to Zoe and Izzy Atkins earlier. They're already in Austria and Switzerland. Obviously, you go away for months on end to get ready, don't you?
You do. It's a really quite lonely life where you make a lot of sacrifices, but they're definitely worth it. I mean, for the Olympics, everyone gets excited once every 4 years, which is fantastic. And we are a nation obsessed by the Olympics. But there's a lot of hard work that goes into every minute of preparation beforehand. So there is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of excitement. It is an event like nothing else. Everyone always says, treat it like it's, the normal weekend. Well, it's not. That whole world is watching. It's incredibly exciting. And, it's a time where you have to raise your game. Beijing will be very interesting. No one really knows what to expect. Not many sports have had test events out there. So the alpine skiers, none of them have ever skied the hills there before, which is unheard of. Normally, quite a lot of the experienced athletes know all the terrain. So it's going to be really interesting.
You started skiing at the age of 18 months, isn't that right? Born in Hove, not necessarily the best backing for a skiing career. But what is it about the Winter Olympics, do you think, that sparks that flame in so many people?
I mean, we as Britain have an incredibly supportive fan base of winter sports, not just from watching it on TV, but from participation. Our levels are huge. And I've actually just been at a national snow show the other day, and we had 1,000 people at 9 a.m. in Birmingham queuing to get in just because they wanted that buzz of snow sport again. And Ski France have conducted this questionnaire, and it says that 50% of people during the pandemic have changed what they want from their holidays going forward. And actually, it means that people are looking for more healthier, more family adventures, something they can experience together. So they've created these contactless catered chalets, and it means that you're in your own bubble, but you've got all the kind of premium food delivered to you. You've got a butler on your phone on WhatsApp, and it means that you can really enjoy that adventure without the stresses of thinking, oh, I've got to go to the supermarket, I've got to take risks here. Take the risks on the mountain, take the risk skiing fast, not in everything else in life.
I mean, of course, you know, it's all very well and it sounds fabulous, but you do have to have some money to do that. But, I mean, let's talk about back here in the UK, accessibility to those who just want to go and find a dry ski slope. Is there enough accessibility to do that? How many slopes are there in Britain, for example? Do we know?
I mean, there are hundreds of dry ski slopes. We've got 6 snow domes in the UK. We have now simulators that you can go to. Yesterday, I was at a school in Surrey that has its own ski simulator. There are places that you can go and try the sport so that you can experience it. But like you said, Kirsty, before spending a lot of money, although there are really a huge range of budgets out there. You know, these catered chalets, they start at $480 per person per week, including all the food and everything. But like you said, we want people to get into the sport. We know that it's an amazing sport. So if you can go and try it at your local ski slope, I go and coach there once a week at Sandown Dry Ski Slope, which is 8 seconds long, but it's where I started my career. And it's a really great learning curve. And there's these snow domes, like I said, where you can ski on real snow. And it's just an amazing family experience to try together.
Like after the Summer Olympics, people watch a bit of the, you know, BMXing or whatever it might be, and they go, oh yeah, I want to do that. I want to get out there and do that. So we will see an influx, won't we, as we sort of count down to the Olympics, and then after as well, people getting like, ooh, as it comes up to Easter as well, that they want to get on
I'm out
slopes.
on my BMX all the time.
Are
now.
you? Yeah, you did talk about your BMX a little bit after the Summer Olympics, but we will.
Well, you can do BMXing on snow as well now, so that's possibly something you could, you know, look towards. You could get them that go down the mountain.
That sounds incredibly dangerous, and I want to pick up on that because for people, particularly those of us who might take it up later on, not necessarily with Olympic intentions, but there's a risk here. I mean, didn't you break your neck skiing?
This is very hard for me because I am an advocate for the sport and everyone trying it. But yes, you are right. But I'm one of those people who got injured everything I do. And, you know, I skied at 93 miles an hour. You don't have to learn to ski and have that as a goal. That is a very extreme goal that you tiptoe towards. So I think everyone can start off in the sport. The technology now is amazing to learn to ski. It's much safer than it used to be. The skis are easier. You get a buzz quicker. You've got amazing instruction out there. There's YouTube videos. There's just so much learning skills accessible to all of us. And it really is limiting to try. I've coached a 78-year-old Irish guy to ski. He'd never skied before, and he started at 78 years old. So there is time for everyone.
Fabulous. And just quickly, I mean, you said, obviously, we know that you're going to be able to watch it and enjoy it rather than being involved in all the pressure. But will you be going out there? Will you be involved in any of the sort of production side, media, commentary?
Yeah, so I'm helping host with my friend Claire Balding from Salford. I've decided to stay in studio, which is very weird for me because when I host Ski Sunday, I'm like in amongst the crowd and I love it. But actually for the Olympics, it's such a huge event that when you're in studio and you can see every different sport, I feel Olympified. I feel like I get more into all of the sports and I can be a better fan.
Fabulous. Chemi, it's so good to see you. I just must say, go on.
Well, I'm waiting for you to are you putting your goggles back on?
Well, you've got to play me out with the Ski Sunday theme tune.
Yeah, well,
we can all do this, you know. There's no glamour to this.
He was trying to stick it round his head a minute ago. Because he was doing all sorts of...
I'll send you guys some of these. For your Olympic coverage, I'll send you a couple of pairs
better
of
on
these
you than it looks on me, but there you go.
Chemi, wonderful. Please do. That would be fabulous. Lovely to see you, virtually. Thank you very much.
Oh, isn't it nice chatting to your friends?
You do that every day.
Yeah, but
Members of Parliament.
Right. Move on.
Should we stay with sport? Sorry, you're making me laugh.
You're right. You're crying again.
No, I'm not crying.
Hollywood
star and Wrexham co-owner Ryan Reynolds took fans by surprise last night.
Yeah, because he turned to watch his team play.
He watched his team in action for the first time. The Deadpool actor took 100% control of the Welsh club from the Wrexham Supporters Trust in February after his bid was approved by fans, but he may have wished to stay at home. They lost 3-2 just by Maidenhead United. But at least he was there. I mean, he was in America. Is he filming here? Probably.
No, I think he probably nipped over to watch the game, didn't he? He's probably gone home with a list of, need 2 new defenders.
Well, anyway,
new goalie.
It's good to see he was there. I think it's probably great to go to that game and see a Hollywood star in the stands.
Marvellous. Marvellous. Now, one COP26 delegate. I don't think she counts as a delegate. Anyway, someone's going to miss the COP26 conference is the Queen after receiving medical advice to rest. The 95-year-old monarch underwent preliminary medical checks in hospitals last Wednesday after also cancelling a visit to Northern Ireland. She's only conducted one day of remote engagements in the week since. Well, the Queen apparently wants COP26 to result in meaningful action after being overheard at the Welsh Parliament earlier this month saying it was really irritating when climate issues go unanswered. But we wish her well.
We absolutely do. OK, so keep your views coming in as ever. We're back tomorrow.
One day we'll say keep your views to yourself, because they're all quite upset.
Sometimes there's a lot, when I ask you, you're
unless
like, no. Of course, it is budget day. We know a lot about it, but not everything. We will be covering
full coverage here, yes.
On GB News. That's it from us on the Great British Breakfast. Coming up, it's The Briefing with Tom Harwood, talking all things budget, funny enough. See you tomorrow.
Hello, very good morning to you. Well, there's a lot of wet weather to come over the next few days. Through today, we've got some persistent rain across western parts of the UK, and it's windy and mild. And that's all down to this air coming up from the southwest. But we've got this weather front here, and that's becoming pretty persistent through the day today, not moving very quickly, very far. We've got weather warnings in place across northern England through today, but as we go into Thursday, we'll have one in for Wales as well. Let's take a look at where that rain is at the moment then. We've got some pretty heavy rain across southern Scotland and Cumbria. It's just clearing out of Northern Ireland. It's gradually trickling its way slowly southwards. A lot of cloud in the sky elsewhere. A few sunny breaks developing to the east of higher ground through Wednesday afternoon, but with strong winds, it will feel quite gusty around the coastal areas, despite, though, temperatures getting up to 18, that's 64 in Fahrenheit. As we go through Wednesday evening then, we'll continue to see that rain pushing its way slowly southwards, becoming heavier then across northwest Wales and eventually getting into more of Wales as we go into the early hours of Thursday. Again, ahead of it, we'll see a lot of cloud in the sky, another very mild picture over into the early hours of Thursday, but just starting to turn a little bit cooler in the far northwest of Scotland, 9 degrees there in Stornoway, 48 Fahrenheit, compared to 12 degrees there in London. Now, as we go through into Thursday, what have we got on the cards? More in the way of rain across these western areas. It really is going to persist, and I think those totals will start to build up. So expect some surface water flooding on the roads, the risk of some flash flooding as well in places. Do take care if you are planning any journeys. Still dry across southeast England through the day. Some sunshine developing here. A much, much brighter day for Northern Ireland. A few showers coming in across Scotland, and still on the mild side across the board. Now, as we go into the Halloween weekend, it stays fairly unsettled, further strong winds and the risk of some heavy rain at times too. Our temperatures begin to slide away, though, as we go into Sunday. I'll see you very soon. Take care.